Good evening. Travis?
All right. Special good evening to everyone, all viewers, listeners, those who are following us, Theatre Classics of the Caribbean. This is our fourth installment from the Department of Creative and Festival Arts of the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine. And we are very pleased and very with the way in which this program is proceeding, has been proceeding. And it's an opportunity for us to continue to recognize the important role that the theatre classics, the theatre of the Caribbean, has played in the development of Caribbean society, the development of intellectual thought, the development of the curricula, the literature and the theatre arts curricula in our secondary school, on the ability of us, of ourselves as West Indians to define ourselves, define our own identities, to understand our history, to understand our place in the world, and to begin to come to terms with how we as a people can continue to progress and develop along various lines and various lines explored by the theatre. So today, we are going to focus on TiJean and his brothers. A very important play for many, many reasons, but TiJean and his brothers, written by Derek Walcott, Nobel Prize winner in 1992 for literature. And this play was first done in the year 1957. Yeah, that's actually before the Federation, I believe. It was done at the RC Boys Infant School in Castries, St. Lucia. And the story of this play is that Derek Walcott had been in the US at that time, attending a workshop with Errol Hill and some others. And he was so frightened and cold in his hotel room that he took, being homesick and remembering the old stories and folk tales. He penned this play and subsequently sent the handwritten script to his brother Roderick in St. Lucia, who began working on it and eventually staging it at the RC Infant School in 1957. The play was done subsequently in Trinidad in 1958 at the Little Carib Theatre. And from then on, many, many revisions. And at this point, I think it's really fair and important to acknowledge, even if we can't count the number of persons, but just acknowledge so many of the persons who participated in this play in one way or another. Many who are not with us, but are gone, but whose work and energies and talent and sweat went into the making of this play. It really is important to honor those ancestors who were also instrumental with Derek Walcott in bringing TiJean where it is now. TiJean has been and still continues to be a very, very distinguished and definitive piece of West Indian theatre. And we give thanks for all those in all the spaces that have worked this play. And that is why tonight I am and we are very honored and very proud to have a very illustrious panel, people who have either worked directly on the play or have thought about it or written about it, who have been engaged with this play and with Caribbean theatre. And we are going to introduce you to this panel who will be leading us through discussions on various aspects of this play. And I know you'll find it very, very exciting. So let me just hand over to my co-host, which I'm very fortunate with me, that is Ms. Carol Hussain. Yes, Carol, please proceed with the introductions.
Yes. Good evening, everyone, and welcome again to Theatre Classics of the Caribbean. And today we're doing, as Dr. Week said, TiJean and his brothers, written by Derek Walcott. And this is for the benefit of students who are signed in, and we have some lower school students who have joined us this evening, Form 3, etc., which was written in 1957, as Dr. Weeks said. Today, and for archiving purposes, today is May 22nd, and it's about 6:05, 6:06 p.m., right? And what I was saying is that today we're doing TiJean by Derek Walcott, and a few weeks ago we started off Theatre Classics of the Caribbean with Dream on Monkey Mountain, another of Walcott's epic works. So if you haven't seen it, if you weren't here for the last for that installment of Theatre Classics, please, you can look at the DCFA's channel on YouTube and take a look at it. So today we have 4 wonderful people who are joining us today, and I'm introducing 2 of these people. Again, we are delighted to welcome again Mr. Wendell Manwaring. And we're immensely pleased to say, welcome back, Wendell, welcome back to Theatre Classics. So Wendell Roger Manwaring is a singer, writer, actor, producer, teacher, sound engineer, and director. He's been involved in theatre and the performing arts for more than 3 decades, and is a founding member of the avant-garde group Tricanal, with whom he continues to perform and produce work. And you know, if you're Trinidadian and even beyond in the region, we know Tricanal is a major group when it comes to rapso. Apart from his unique creativity, Mr. Manwaring's talent and expertise has been honed by his experiences working with and learning from stalwarts in the Caribbean culture and theatre from both Trinidad and Tobago and regions such as Helen Camps, who he started performing with at Trinidad 10 Theatre in 1985. And Trinidad 10 Theatre is no longer around, right? And of course, renowned Derek Walcott and the Trinidad Theatre Workshop. He's worked with Peter Minshall and the Kalu Company, Noble Douglas and the Lilliput Theatre, and many others. So we're really, really proud of Mr. Manwaring and his achievements. He continues to challenge his growth and development as a contemporary Caribbean artist in the world today. And importantly, and we must say of Wendell Manwaring, in spite of all his great achievements, he remains a humble human being, willing always to add to the good in this world. And Wendell, you're someone that I hold in high regard and I respect.
Thank you
very much. Welcome again.
Thank you very much. Deeply honored to be here.
Travis, you can go ahead. Oh, you're muted, I think, Travis. I'm not hearing you.
Yes. So at this point, yeah, we are honored and pleased to welcome, you know, to the Caribbean. You see the mountain behind me here? Professor Lawrence Briner. And Briner is a professor, which is also a university that we associate with the writer of the play that we are focusing on tonight. But Professor Briner has written extensively on Caribbean literature. You might remember an introduction to West Indian poetry. As a student, I actually learned quite a lot from reading Professor Briner. He's focused on oralization in West Indian poetry. And he's contributed to many books, including The Art of Derek Walcott, Dictionary of Literary Biography, 20th Century Caribbean and Black African Authors, West Indian Literature. He's been a contributor of scholarly works to periodicals, including Journal of Commonwealth Studies, Journal of West Indian Literature, Modern Fiction Studies, etc. Clearly, Professor Briner has been very much in Indian literature and definitely understands what is it that we have been trying to do here in this space. And it is for this reason that we welcome him and we look forward to his contribution to the discussion on TiJean and his brothers. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you, Travis. I'm very happy to be here this evening. The only thing I would add is that I very much enjoyed being one of the judges for the finals of the National Poetry Slam several years ago. So it's another sort of thing that I do.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So moving on, I'm going to introduce Dr. Jean Antoine Dunn, and most of us who are alumni of the University of the West Indies will recognize the name in literature, associated with literature. So Dr. Jean Antoine Dunn is an author, literary critic, painter, disability activist, filmmaker, and journalist with a focus on Caribbean and Irish writing. Dr. Antoine Dunn is also the founder of and first chair of the UWI Network and Outreach for Disability Education and Sensitization, otherwise called NODES. She's a retired UWI academic who held the position of senior lecturer in literatures in English. She also worked with Mr. Bruce Paddington in designing the Bachelor of Arts degree in film at the UWI. Dr. Antoine specializes in the work of Nobel laureate in literature, Derek Walcott. Her works, Derek Walcott's Love Affair with Film, 2017, looks extensively into Walcott's work in film, and Walcott as poet and seer, which was published in 2015, chronicles his journey or evolution through poetry. Dr. Antoine has also directed Disabled, Mislabeled in 2015, and a film on Professor Gordon Roller called Rivers of Sound. Now, this is, of course, an abridged version of the bio. Her other published works include Visions and Revisions, Filming the Caribbean, published in the Caribbean Quarterly, Interlocking Basins of a Globe, Essays on Derek Walcott, which she also has written in and edited. Where is Hair? Remapping the Caribbean, which was published in the Journal of West Indian Literature, and an important work, new area of research and discussion, the montage principle, Einstein, in the New Cultural and Critical Context, which was published in 2004. It's a collection of essays that argues the relevance of film to literature, and it sort of it launched pads of Sergei Einstein's concept of the montage theory. Dr. Antoine has delivered, and this is of importance to us this evening as well, the Nobel Lecture in St. Lucia in 2006. And she was also keynote speaker at the Carifesto Walcott Symposium in 2017 in Barbados, delivering an address entitled Derek Walcott, A Crystal of Ambiguities. We especially welcome Dr. Antoine today to Theatre Classics and look forward to invaluable contribution to us today on a discussion on the master wordsmith, Derek Walcott. Welcome, Dr. Antoine.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're muted.
Carol.
Thank you very much. It is my pleasure to be here. So nice to see everybody again.
All right, thanks very much. All right, so not least is Dr. Henry Mutu. Dr. Henry Mutu is one of the Caribbean's foremost theatre arts practitioners and is a household name in regional theatre arts and cultural practices. He's an award-winning actor, stage director, and designer, and arts manager. Mr. Mutu's memorable and distinguished career began in his birthland of Guyana at the age of 16 with a 3-year apprenticeship program at the Theatre Guild of Ghana. After this, he went on to study advanced acting, directing, and stage management at the University of the West Indies, then theatre design at Croydon College of Art and Design in the UK, and did a master's degree in theatre practices at Manchester University, Rose Bruford College in Kent, UK. He has worked in the theatre and cultural arts fields throughout the Caribbean, designing and or directing for every major artist, including Derek Walcott. And he has lectured at the University of the West Jamaica. And for 7 years, he was a senior tutor at the School of Drama, Edna Manley College of the Arts in Jamaica. He's also been a visiting scholar at the University of South Florida. And he has taught design and directed many Caribbean classics, including TiJean and his brothers, of course. And it is for this reason that we are very, very honored to have Mr. Mutu once with us again to discuss Caribbean theater classics. Incidentally, I took this information from a script that was used to honor Mr. Mutu and his wife when they retired after working in the Cayman Islands for 30 years. Welcome, Henry, and we're happy to have you again with us.
Thank you, Travis, and thanks to everyone. It's always a pleasure, and I look forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Right, wonderful, good. Thinking of TiJean and his brothers, and thinking of that play as a Caribbean classic, one of the things that we recognize is the attempts and the work by the late Honorable Derek Walcott to develop a theater aesthetic for the Caribbean. And by doing so, we understand the work journey rather into the history of the Caribbean, into the cultural forms of the Caribbean. And of course, Derek's work in terms of exploring the history of the Caribbean in order to inform his art, both as a poet and as a playwright, is well recognized and known. But it is important, I think, if we are going to examine the plays that stand out in the Caribbean, mostly at the craft of the formation, how these plays were put together, how the various influences, the various conventions, theater conventions and traditions, how the playwright worked his craft in order to bring these conventions together to create something novel, something that distinguishes us. And I think that TiJean very much that way. And so this is why I am inviting Professor Briner to assist us here with this, to think about this, to probe our minds a bit in terms of the form of TiJean and his brothers. Would we consider it a piece of Creole theater, considering the various influences and conventions that Derek utilized when he crafted that fine piece of work? Professor Briner?
Yes, hi. Just give me an idea. Am I talking for some length of time, or are you conversing with me with prompts? Or
well, you just proceed, and I really prefer not to interrupt you. So
okay.
yes.
Well, no, the program said engagement, and I had no idea how serious that might be.
Okay. Okay. Yes. Yes. I will engage you. We will.
So yes, I want to talk about what it means to think in terms of a Creole theater, but I'd like to start by something that Travis just prompted me on, which is that when Walcott wrote about this play himself in essays, he talked about it as his first West Indian play. One of the reasons he was doing that was the timing, I think. This is a play written in '57. And in the year it was produced, '58, the same year, his pageant play for the inauguration of Federation, Drums and Colors, was also produced in the Botanical Gardens in Port of Spain. So Federation is in the background. And Derek's relationship to politics is always a little oblique, but that may be a factor in it. I don't want to make any hard and fast distinction between what he might mean by West Indian and what he might mean by Creole. But it's interesting that he uses the term West Indian up until about 1970 something. That's the way he talks about it. He had written plays about the Caribbean before, and many of them involve various influences or borrowings. For instance, the earliest play, Henri Christophe, which is about the Haitian Revolution. He wrote it when he was 20, and it was broadcast on the BBC, on the Caribbean Voices program. But though the setting is Caribbean, the language is Elizabethan Jacobean. He's imitating the tragedies of Shakespeare and Webster and the various people whose names we forget all the time, Turner. So it's a strange combination, but you understand why he wants to do it. He wants to elevate the subject. We don't have enough kings in the Caribbean or whatever, so let's have a play that is like a Renaissance play, like a classical Greek play about the big people, and see what happens with it. But then you also have the Sea at Dauphin, 1954, which is set in St. Lucia, in a small fishing village on the Atlantic coast. It's got quite a lot of French Creole in it. And in fact, I have never had a chance to see if there are various versions of it preserved in the various places his papers are to be found. But there are a couple of differences. There was an early publication of it, and then the publication later, when he did his first collection of plays in 1970, reduced the amount of French Creole in the text to make it more accessible, I think. So he kept the French Creole in the songs, but not in some of the dialogue. A little adjustment. Playwrights have to make all these adjustments when they're trying to appeal to a broader audience. But this is a play which also has very interesting roots. It's modeled on a play by the Irish playwright Synge. Walcott knew about Synge from his teachers at St. Mary's, who were Irish brothers and were constantly pushing Irish writers in St. Lucia. And in addition, he writes about how he was not yet, but not in the first period when the play was actually written, but later in working on the play, he was seeing it as one of his plays that had something to do with his relationship to Japanese film, especially, because he talks about how looking at pictures of Japan always reminds him of St. Lucia. He always sees an affinity between the two places. That becomes more important with TiJean, and especially with Dream on Monkey Mountain. But the Sea at Dauphin is also a play that's combining local language with an international model, and it's not a very close model. He's changed a lot about the play. It's just an inspiration for the play. And this too has been a very successful work. It's played quite successfully all over the world because it doesn't present too much difficulty apart from the Creole. And in a performance, you can always translate some of that, either silently or having characters repeat things in different languages. So I just wanted to mention that there are these plays beforehand that are combining Caribbean features with features he comes upon in his reading primarily elsewhere in the world, because that's a big factor with TiJean as well. A question is whether that constitutes creolization or just borrowing or just ordinary education. You read books, you don't care where they come from, and you can be influenced by them. What makes a play Creole? What would we be looking for that characteristic? Obviously, language. If the language is non-standard, if it comes from a specific place, or if it's a kind of generic regional language that the work is being written in, that's something we take in right away. And it's going to be a feature of a Creole work. Maybe a quick definition of what Creole means in this kind of context. So just what the linguistics people mean. It's something that happens culturally when two cultures are interacting for a long period of time in the same place. So that a Creole language, for instance, is not just one person borrowing somebody else's language. It's a combination of two languages which have kind of rubbed up against each other for a while. So it's unlike a trade language, like Swahili, which is just people trying to get things bought and sold. So they grab whatever words they can think of in whatever language and put them together. There's not very strong grammars in Pidgin. But language is a very important thing to be looking at, and the decisions that writers make about language are important. Why do these characters speak this way? The next thing to consider for Creoleness would be the context, the field of reference. So in the case of this play, it's all sorts of cultural practices and folk tales and wisdom and superstitions and the particular choice of things to be terrified by. All of these are part of what constitutes the, I was about to say St. Lucianness, but the island is not specifically St. Lucia. It's recognizable, but he doesn't specify as far as I can remember. So it's a sort of a generic Caribbean island, but yeah, of course, when you look at the details, it isn't. So you'll have also in some cases, political context, topical references. That doesn't happen so much in TiJean because of the nature of the presentation. For one thing, when you see it in the theater, you think of this as a play about human characters. But it's actually a play about animals telling a story. And the humans are only characters in that story. And the story ends before the play ends. Because there's a reason to tell the story. And the reason to tell the story is to make the rain stop so that the moon comes out. And what the animals are thinking is, if we can get the moon to come out, the rain will stop. So they tell the story about how there got to be a man in the moon. And the result of that is the moon comes out. That's the objective of the play in a very simple way, if you think of it as a play about the animals. We all read it, we all see it as a play about the people. There's a really interesting thing there, though. My students point this out to me very frequently. They say, when you get to the end of this play, there are no humans left in the world of the play. Everybody's either dead or gone to the moon, which is, where you tell children their dogs have gone. It's a very strange ending. And in the theater, it's really upbeat. There's a chorus. He loves choruses, right? Dream on King Mountain ends with the same kind of chorus. This is great, this is great, this is great. And the animals point up to the moon and see, there's TiJean and Wolum. In the moon, he's the man in the moon. He's going to take care of us. And look down and be inspirational. Again, very much like the ending of Dream on Monkey Mountain. But they're gone from the earth. This is a big problem for the Bolum, who's looking forward to dying, and we can't tell if he's ever going to die or not, or maybe he already has. We don't know. These are not things you think about in the theater. These are things you think about when you think about the play. And there's another twist at the end, I think, because the image is of TiJean becoming the man in the moon with the bundle of sticks on his back. That may be a familiar image when you hear it, because it's in Shakespeare. It's in The Tempest. The man in the moon has a bundle of sticks on his back. And that conception seems to be European. I've never been able to trace the West Indian dimension of that imagery for the man in the moon. But it may be like the little comical borrowings from Greek tragedy at the very beginning of the play. These are interesting things for him to be doing. So field of reference here means a folktale which, by the names of the characters, comes from the Eastern Caribbean. Nature which feels and looks like the Caribbean. Language that sounds like the Caribbean, but again, not exactly a particular place some of the time. No topical references, no historical references. Christian imagery combined with imagery from other sources. So we've got the language, we've got the field of reference, which has to do with what the audience needs to know to get the play. And that, of course, affects how successful it can be when it leaves its own point of origin. But the third important feature that I want to just put out up front, movement. Again, when Derek wrote about this play, this was what was important to him. Theatricality, physicality, gesture. A couple of things are happening there. These are things he learned in New York in 1958, 7, 8. Because he was reading, he was working with playwrights and stage people. And he was learning about actually first encountering, I think, the concept that a play is a theatrical event and not something in a book. I don't know if he ever saw a play in St. Lucia in his 20s. I don't know whether that was possible or not. Somebody might know. But his idea about a play, and you can tell this from features of the early plays, was radio plays. The long introduction at the beginning of the Theatre film, for instance, is the stage direction about the scene and the layout of objects on the scene. But it's intended, clearly intended to be a voiceover on a radio play. Very common, right? There's lots of voiceovers in radio plays to explain the setting, to explain where things are. This is his model for many of the early plays. And I think to some extent, though not completely, this one, because TiJean had been changed a bit in the form that we see it. But he's having this, it's the shift from reading Shakespeare to having to put it on stage and think about it on stage. And this is what amazed him in New York. He was meeting people who did that, and he wanted to learn how to do that. So his writing of that period of the like 60s, more or less, is all about how do West Indian people move? How do we put that on the stage? Not just how do they talk and how do we put that on the stage, but physical, postural, gestural elements of theater. And he becomes, as a result of that Rockefeller Fellowship in New York, a man of the theater for the first time. And his brother Ravi gives him a theater, basically. I mean, not right up front, but pretty soon that's what happens. And he has a theater where he just pretty much locks in his cast for a couple of years before he lets them put on a show for anyone to see, because he wants to work on these questions of movement and theatricality. What that gets to in terms of realization. Yeah, yep.
Yeah, I'm just engaging you. The two things. One, he was exposed to theater as a boy in St. Lucia. Well, two different kinds of theater that he has spoken about. Well, one would have been, there would have been an amateur society, I think, that his father would have been part of, and that Harold Simmons, you know, who had a great influence, and he was also part of that dramatic society. And in addition to that, he often said that his mother, you know, dabbled in amateur productions. She was a headmistress of the Methodist school, and so she loved Shakespeare as well, and she staged stuff. But he also had the informal theater, if you like, yeah, of the streets. And apart from the theater of the streets, he was also very much exposed to the storytelling tradition through his aunt in Choiseul, I think. So he had that other theater as well, which would have been a tremendous influence on absorbing from his European education and from his exposure via Harold Simmons, etc., and his mother. So how did he bring these traditions to TiJean? And so the Papa Jab tradition, which is a ritual I was fortunate enough to experience as a boy, you know, very, you know, scared as boys. So that Papa Jab tradition, that form there, and also the storytelling tradition, how he brought that now to those European conventions, whether it's from the Greek or Shakespeare, etc., to create TiJean and his brothers. And I call Papa Jab, the Papa Jab form, the ritual, a Creole form, because there were various influences. Certainly the African masquerade tradition, and perhaps dominant in that form, but thematically, the whole concept of good and evil and the resurrection and death that happens in that ritual was very much Christian/Catholic influenced. So here the different worlds coming together, and certainly the performance of the ritual on the street would have been an engagement and a response to the dominant Christian force in the society. I'm sure a lot of these things would have been impacting Walcott when he was writing, and they found their way into the play. So in the discussion of the play as a piece of Creole theater, these, invite some interesting thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've been a little mischievous here and kind of tried to prod you to say some of those things because I know you're more equipped to do it than I am. But and another factor that I see is, he has that scene in What the Twilight Says, where he talks about he and his twin brother on the balcony, forbidden to go and join the regular children who were involved in all kinds of dubious behavior around these other things. So the prohibition would also be a prompt for somebody like him at that age. And I think in TiJean, what you're seeing is those elements, they're not structural elements. They're brought into the play, and they certainly contact a local audience, no question about it, right? They're there. For people from outside the region, for instance, my own students, for the most part, what I do is give them, it's Daniel Crowley, I think, who has an article about spiritual beings in St. Lucia, like in the 50s sometime. And it has little descriptions of the various devils and these kinds of things, and not the carnival creatures, but Papa Bois, things like that. So at least there's a place they can look them up. They're not always what a person nowadays would say was the way this particular custom was followed. But they're very helpful for students who are lost otherwise. And in the theater, of course, you just see scary things. You don't need a cultural background. If you've got the cultural background, it resonates more. If you're just delighting in the theater and people dancing around and doing cartwheels in odd costumes, that's also theater, right? And this is something Derek was doing in every medium. Just the way in his poetry, he will write sentences that to a reader of standard English exclusively will just look poetic. There's something a little unusual, but it's poetic. They're actually Creole. Like using dead as a verb. The sea soft.
Yeah. Certainly, but I think the standard reader doesn't see it that way. Go ahead. Yeah, I think what you began by saying, that language, I think, is very, very important, because he also always spoke about his work on language, on finding a language, a medium where he certainly infuses the Creole languages of the Caribbean, the linguistic power of the indigenous languages, and uses it to reshape, if you like, the English language, what we've inherited, the colonial language. So in TiJean, that's very evident, and of course, bringing the poetic discipline of poetry to it in terms of and meters and so on. So we certainly get something, but it had a mother. We get something Trinidadian, we get something Lucian, we get some Caribbean phrasing and idioms, that's using English lexicon, but we get in something that is novel and distinguished, and which I think adds to what you're saying about the importance of language to create a Creole theater. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, right. Great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I mean, I just wanted to get the three general areas for kind of seeking Creole elements in a play. If you want to call it a Creole theater, what's it going to have? What are you going to be paying attention to? And I think those three: the language, context, and field of reference, and finally movement. Movement, I think, is important to Walcott more than anything else at that stage in his career. It was a new thing to him. And that's what he says about it anyway.
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks. Yeah, Carol Miss Carol Hussein is the one that has me when it comes to timing and so on. And Carol, are we okay? Doing okay?
We're going over a little. It's 20 to 7, so we need to keep it tight.
All right, wonderful.
I'll
So
take back some of it.
juncture, thank Professor Briner, but the form of this program, Theatre Classic, is that we all engage each other. So thank you. As we just move this time at this juncture to Dr. Henry Muto, and we're very excited about his practical work in the theatre, his directing of TiJean, various places. I'm not sure which one he's going to share, but I'm looking forward to it. Over to you, Henry. Over to you, rather.
You're muted. Dr. Mutu, you're muted. Sorry about that.
The muting. Okay, here we go. Sorry. Thank you, Travis. Okay, there's something on my screen here. Let me get this out of the way. Yes. Let me just quickly start by saying that I like and appreciate what Dr. Briner said about the frog, perhaps as the person or the animals, as a matter of fact, as important to the play. And perhaps that's something that another director might want to look at. Although I do appreciate that they're important, I think that they're more the griot who remembers the history of the forest and is able to retell the story so that it will continue to go on. So while they're important, and while they were certainly highlighted in the production that I did, and this one is from the University of South Florida, who had invited me to come up to do it. And so I have a slightly different take. What I'm reading now will be my notes, pieces of notes from my book. You'll see little sketches from the book and so on. I work, as a matter of fact, the way I work with my production scripts, very much like Derek, with lots of sketches of positioning. If things come to my head, I note it down and do a little drawing of it and so on, because I tend to work fairly visually. And so I hope that what I have to say, I mean, it's not definitive in the sense that other directors may have other ideas, but I will read it, and then hopefully it will spur some debate. So Derek Walcott offers a path to producing TiJean and his brothers. Quote, and this will be slide 2. We're going to bring up that now. We present to others a deceptive simplicity that they may miss as provincial, primitive, childlike, but which is in truth a radical innocence. That is what our fable is about. So the play, well, we know the story, but I'm going to quickly run through it for you, and we're going to go slide 3, 4, and then we continue on like that, right? So this is a story in brief. A poor mother and her 3 sons, one physically strong, one of intellectual prowess, and the other an innocent youngster, live in a mountain forest, the home of animals, birds, beasts, etc. Slide 6 and 7. The family is visited by the Bolam, an unborn spirit and agent of the devil. On behalf of its master, the Bolam issues a challenge to the mother. Make the devil feel human weakness, anger, rage. If they win, they will receive wealth, and whatever they ask. If they fail, they will be devoured by the devil. So fate leaves the family no alternative. And this word F-A-T-E is important in this juncture. Fate leaves them no alternative. They have no choice but to accept the challenge and go out to do battle with the devil. So this section would be slide 8. And these are not specifically related to the particular things I'm saying, but they give an idea from the production of the characters. So Grosjean and Mijan each venture out of the house to engage the devil. They, of course, lose the battle, are eaten, and their bones buried. So there's a slide there with the if you go up a little bit with the slide, then you will see the little sketch of the grave that I have, a little thumbnail. I think that there should be one of them. Right, he's killed. Okay, all right, sorry. I don't see that there. So we go. So Mijan is blessed by his mother. He ventures out. He befriends the birds and forest animals, confronts the devil. His acts of defiance anger the devil and make him feel human. As his reward of sovereigns is filling a vessel at his feet, TiJean is shown his mother dying in the house. Then Bolam implores TiJean to request his life as a reward for his victory. The request is granted and Bolam is born. The devil and his fiends soar away, vowing to continue the battle with the mortals. So these are some discussion notes now that follows. And this is my take on the play for this specific production. As a director, one has to find a conceptual statement so that you can physicalize all of the different layers that the play contains. So for me, in this production, the play is about submission, compliance, acceptance, yielding, agreement, etc., and defiance, opposition, confrontation, non-compliance, disobedience, dissent, bravado, etc. Between these two polarities of action and passivity and the beliefs that trigger them, F-A-T-E, faith, F-A-I-T-H, faith, and fear, the action of the play is advanced. And then I gave the actors some suggestions for exploring and for possibly discovering the motivation behind the character's action. Here we go. One of the major tragic flaws of the human animal is fear of death and the unknown, and the unknowns of life, God and the devil, which paralyzes them. Out of fear, we engineer belief systems, mythologies, etc., which, while they act as a balm, leave no room for debate and we submit to our fate. In the play, TiJean is an exception. He is too young and innocent of the ways of the world and of religious and philosophical logic, having not yet collected enough cultural memory to generate the sort of fear that would hinder instructive decision-making. He acts on his own logic. It is the reason why only he of the brothers is able, through acts of defiance, to defeat the devil and gain his admiration. The action moves in arcs, connecting and disconnecting, and finally scribing the sum of their parts, a circle. In the end, everything remains the same. The features will change, the devil says, but the fight is still on. One key, perhaps, to unlocking the play's action is an understanding of the character's belief, and that word is underlined, beliefs, and how those beliefs impact their actions or their decision-making. Consider this exchange between TiJean and the planter devil. TiJean, quote, "I believe in the devil, yes, or so my mother make me." Then he goes on, "Men are lustiferous animals, but at least they have souls." To which the planter devil replies, "A man is no better than an animal. The one with two legs makes more noise, and that makes him believe he can think. It is talk that makes men think they have souls. There is no difference, only in degree. No animal but man, dear boy, savors such a variety of vices. He knows no season for lust. He's a kneeling hypocrite, 2 on 4 legs like a penitent capriped, prays to his maker, but is calculating the next vice." TiJean's belief does not allow him room for accepting any truth in the planter's hypothesis. "All I say is that man is divine," he replies, trying to hold back his anger. In the face of impending doom, he clings to his established belief about man, unable to accept another opinion. When the planter opines that the goat might be smarter than man, this is too much of an affront to TiJean's belief. He explodes in anger and loses his life. Consider this again. The characters in this play are prisoners of their own beliefs, fears, and superstitions. Hence, the design of the set as a cage which houses them, a sort of a impressionistic prison. Grosjean believes in muscle power. Of course, he says, "I have an arm of iron and it have nothing I freed man, beast or beast man." TiJean believes, of course, in book knowledge. This book have every knowledge it have, checking up on man with cow foot, boss. The mother believes in basically in good and evil, in God and evil, sorry, the devil. In the words of the devil, she is, quote, "the poor, wretched fool who thinks it's holy to be poor, who scraped her knees to the knuckle, praying to an old beard that's been deaf since noise began." Again, that's to trigger the actors to start thinking about the play and finding their motivation. And these are some notes from my brief, which I presented. This would go to slide 28 now if we want to skip to that. So we're looking now, as a director, one has to look at the mood and atmosphere. And then remember that I'm directing and designing the set also, not the costumes. And so I'm looking at several things at the same time. So the type and quality of feeling, these are things to consider. The type and quality of feeling engendered by a balance of the light and shade on the prison-like primal beauty of the forest environment, the setting, and oral, the symphonic soundscape of the environment, birds, cries, chirps, tweets, baying wind, rain, thunder, drums, shrieks, songs, chants, etc. And of course, the beauty of Andre Tanker's music. I think we mustn't forget Andre Tanker at all in any production of TiJean, because I think the music is one of the features of this work and enhances the production a whole lot. So these two elements orchestrated into one sensory experience create a living environment and a metaphor for the action stroke story. Rhythm and tempo, the type and quality of movement, contractions, undulations, vibrations, the pace at which poetic rhythm and individual actions move, how these engender shape and pattern, flow of movement and gesture, the flow of current from the calypso rhythms that erupt with effervescence, that is the essence of the carnival and the region. The style is carnivalesque. It is not carnival in this production. The production employs masks to create visual power and focus. It draws upon the physical playing of carnival masqueraders, but does not attempt to replicate the mask itself. Texture and color. TiJean and his brothers is a heavily textured poetic work. Texture is to be created by the setting, layered costumes, atmospheric lighting and shadow, moon, sun, rain, drizzle, and animal songs, etc. This goes to slide 30 now and 31. So the space or the setting, and because again, I designed the production, I took pains to try to describe it as the way I saw it and designed it. So for me, the rainforest is a suggested or a poetic, metaphorical rather than a naturalistic setting. It is at once a guile, a world, a prison, where the eternal battle between the forces of ignorance, shadow, and enlightenment, light, moon, plays out. It is like the locus of the play's action, circular and encircling, enclosing, embracing, yet giving the sense of space and restfulness. The outer defining walls are made from unpainted dried bamboo, reaching up to heights of up to 20 feet. The secondary walls, also from dried unpainted bamboo, are created by varying lengths of bamboo held by the imps and are used to create the hut threats, angles, etc. These were used because everything that was on the set was used. The imps never left. Even when they left with the devil, they came back on and went into position to help to create the setting, whether it's the house or wherever, or different points on in the forest, so that the sense of the audience, the vision of the audience is directed to another space, whether it was downstage, upstage, center stage, or so on. Suspended from the ceiling are another sort of wide clump of bamboo poles of varying lengths and distances apart to complete the canopy of the forest and serve as an interruption to light, to create angles and shadows that suggest a geography beyond what we are made to see. Overall, the setting is at the same time beautiful, mysterious, fearsome, nostalgic, threatening, secretive, enchanting, shadowy, windy, noisy, damp, etc., etc. It is static, but it is also mutable. It is a not so passive observer of the play's action. And I like to think in this production that it is one of the major players. It is a world that survived from the playwright's childhood, and this is a quote from Derek, through the figure of a magical child enchanting aunt, a firefly pricked rainforest at dusk. And then a little bit more talk about that. It's a cacophonous cavern of verticals, and that's another thing we don't need to bother with that. It's basically the same thing. So the costumes now, these costumes were just beautifully rendered by Yao Chen. She's originally from China and lives in the United States and works now as a professor at Boston Amherst, at Boston University at Amherst. So all of this is, and this is some notes again to her, all of the characters, these notes, sorry, are to Yao. And I hope she's on listening. All the characters, including the humans, are poetic, dramatic creations of folk imagination through memory. In this context, masks are important, including masks for the humans. The hang of their clothes should emphasize their human silhouette. Some costumes are designed to enhance dance movement in tone, texture, and color, and freedom. Consider the forest environment as described above. Take inspiration also from the snare of the devil TiJean's fishing net. This could be a trigger. Costume specific: devil, planter, papaboa. Shape-shifting, commanding, ruthless, crafty, convincing, textured. Key considerations: speed and ease of transformation. A design that is conceivably one unit which could be stripped away and reassembled to reveal three distinct personalities as necessary. Individual silhouette and character integrity as each manifestation is played. Transformation can and will be built into the action activity. So whenever there was transformation, nobody went off stage to change. It all happened in front of the audience. Animals: frog, bird, firefly, and cricket. Obviously, knowledge and light bearers of the forest, the storytellers, the griots, as magical and as colorful as they can be imagined, but tied together tonally to be read as a unit, free and unhindered movement. The chorus of imps, part of the living forest, malevolent and benevolent, dances, moves, sings, chants, creates songs based on traditional blue and red devils, with very slight variations in color, value and texture, and visual variations in color and value for texture and visual interest. Numbers may vary depending on the availability of students, space, etc. 6 would be minimum. Designs based on the traditional carnival blue devils. See references. Carry tall bamboo staffs to help create the setting. And then, of course, that would include the devil's retinue of flambeau and bat specific now, and La Jablesse or Jablesse, blue and red devils, Sukuya design, and again, designed based on the carnival folk traditions of Trinidad. And then the song, the backing orchestra, we have a flute, guitar, conga drums, and a cymbal. And I described where these will be set behind the main playing area and partly masked by the set, etc., etc. We can leave that out. So these are just my notes to them. And of course, Andre Tanker's score. One of the things we did was that I contacted someone in St. Lucia. He's passed away. And he wrote the score for me in Creole and of Timamai. And the show was opened with Timamai, with the company singing. And the American students were singing it in the French Creole. And that in itself was a song to behold. But I'm going to stop there. And of course, you know, any engagement, I'd be happy to answer whatever questions I can. But these are triggers and so on, some of what I would have liked to see, or what I wanted to see, which I instructed, which is usual for most directors who give actors a brief and then work to discover things that one doesn't put down and which happens during rehearsal. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mutu. Just quickly, I wanted a very interesting concept. I took a lot of notes. There was actually a character that looked like a shaman in one of your sketches. Very interesting. He was wearing an animal head. Yeah. If you would just repeat for the audience, just for the benefit of the audience, TiJean, when was it produced, this play?
Oh, sorry.
And
This
where?
was produced in 2013 at the University of South Florida.
Right.
I think it might have been October, November 2013. The dramaturg was Professor Patrick Finelli, and the school director. We had, they all worked with me and with the company and so on to produce it. And there was we had to, of course, engage an orchestra. They brought in a few people, and we had a voice coach for the actors and so on. And, they did the best. I didn't try to attempt to ask them to speak Caribbean or to speak Creole or anything. What was important for me was that the play, while it is intrinsically Caribbean in many, many ways, it is essentially what Derek is, a Caribbean person who is universal.
Yeah.
That's what Derek is to me anyway, and the Derek that I know. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We're open for questions from the panel or comments. Feel free to just jump in.
Henry, very,
Hey.
very, very rich, very lush, very juicy thing to
Yes.
bite into. I remember being shown some of your designs very early when I think we were doing Dream on Monkey Mountain, and
Yes.
stuff
That's I was right. Right.
at the time.
Yeah, it's interesting because we never finished it conceptually. Raul was directing, and there was a little bit of a thing, and that he moved on, and I left the designs, I left the pictures and so of the drawing. I took a few back with me, but I think they did it, but I never saw, because
that was actually my very first production with the
because I was to go to Holland with it.
Yes, we did it in
and I told
Rotterdam.
Eric I couldn't go because I
Yeah.
couldn't leave the job at the time. And but I didn't even see the pictures now, because I asked Eric about them, and he said, call Albert. And I wrote Albert, and I
Standard
Anyway.
response at the time.
but
But
thank
no,
you, man.
actually,
Thank-
brilliant, beautiful stuff. I mean, really, really floored by a lot of the thinking there.
yeah.
And,
You see, the thing is, the play is so layered that you can, and this is why I had to like stop myself at times, because like you go in a supermarket and there's so many things and you have so many choices and you want to fill your basket with stuff. And I had to really hold myself back and hone in on what this thing is about, because I mean, my own philosophy, I just believe that fear is what is destroying us. Well, me, not just people, but me, I'm included in that you are so fearsome of the things that you were told and know, that sometimes you make choices that, you're worried, because even while you're dismissing them, this fear is at the back of the mind. What if I'm wrong?
Mhm.
And so this, I think, was a key, this bit of, particularly with TiJean and the devil, when, that philosophical talk that they have and had and so on. And it's just fascinating. But the thing is always, how do you stage that? Because you can talk around the play as much as possible, but how do you physicalize it on stage? And that was a challenge. So this is why I was trying to be specific about certain things and then leave things so that the students then can explore and discover with me what exactly, how they're seeing these things rather than me. Because remember that I'm working in with an American environment, with an American sensibility. So one had to give them a chance to see it through their eyes and see whether it's evil. So this is why I stuck to the thing about evil, rather than pinpointing it with, say, in the sugar estates and so on, and the white planter, because we know the play doesn't make, there are very few people that will look at this play, even a bad production, and don't understand the concept of the devil, the planter being, but people seeing the devil.
The twinning of planter and devil.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Let me let somebody else go now. So.
I just want to say that
no, just before you go, sorry, you go, Carol.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I really appreciate the set design and the concept of entrapment, because it to me that is so profound. I've looked at it, but not in that way, where their own beliefs is what caused the destruction, and I know that. But the idea of how we've created this prison,
Yes.
it's mind-blowing, magnificent thinking.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thanks.
Yes. Henry, can you speak to the layers? You said there's there are several layers to this play. Can you speak to the layers?
Well, again, one is an academic exercise. I mean, in other words, we can start talking about philosophies, right? About, and obviously Derek would have dabbled in a lot of, Greek and Roman and sort of modern and Carl Jung with the shadow, the whole idea of the shadow. And you don't want to get in, because when you start to get into this whole idea of the shadow and ego and what the ego does and so on, once you start to get into that, then that exercise, for me as a director, becomes not meaningless. It's useful to have it, but then it becomes an exercise for a different process rather than to direct the play. Because to direct the play, I have to take all these ideas about the layers of the play from a philosophical point of view, from the point of view, for example, of slavery and the estate in the Caribbean. I mean, to any poor person, like the mother who's living in a hut, and as Walcott says, scraping her knees to the knuckle and praying to God, this God, and Derek calls him to a gray beard that's been deaf since time began, or since noise began. So you can imagine, that's another layer that you can interpret the play and produce it, particularly in that, if that was your aim for wanting to highlight this whole idea of the planter. There's the other aspect of like I mentioned it here, of people who leave no room. You see, once you say that you believe something, if you say that you believe that the background behind you is a mountain, and if you don't know if it's a mountain, it's been called a mountain. We have named it that, right? But we don't know if it's actually a mountain. We don't know what it is. We know it's among the earth. So everything that we know is within our experience. We can't know anything that's outside of the memories that we have collected. And this is why you can look at the play and you can say, I mentioned it briefly about cultural memory. What your memory have is what you have is your cultural memory. That's all you have. I mean, if I was to get Alzheimer's tomorrow, I would be nobody. Nobody would, you understand? I don't remember. And if you don't remember, then you don't exist for yourself. People will see you, but you yourself don't know what's going on. And this is what, if we were to engage that layer of the thing in the play about people's their sensibilities, the fact that they cannot accept, if they believe something, they will not accept that there is another alternative to it. And if you talk with them, rather than them agreeing that and to disagree sometimes, they will argue and argue and argue, and they will dismiss you, or you will dismiss them, one of the two. And this is why when TiJean meets with the devil and the planter in particular, and the planter pried into his mouth. The planter wanted him to speak, to say something. And the line where he says, where the devil says, the only entrance I could have gotten or something was through his mouth, but the damn fool closed the door, bolted the door. Because he obviously, if he had spoken, and then, he spoke, but he spoke because the planter kept at him. And rather than either accepting that, look, you know what, you have a point, it's true, if you look at men, they're kneeling hypocrites. They're planning the next vice. Walcott have a similar line in pantomime, where the fella say, "Come and let's talk man to man," and he said, "No, we can't talk man to man, because when men start to talk man to man, the two of them don't." And this is I'm seeing here, and he says, all the other one is thinking is to grab the other one by the balls and rip out these stones and leave him for Kobo to pick. So it's the same concept that people don't, they can't, and that's one of the layers that you understand it as a director or as an academic, and you can go.
Henry, I want to suggest a layer to you that that would miss the thinking of a young audience, I think.
Yes.
All right. So, I mean, students, for example, would appreciate the play as a folktale and find it very delightful. Yeah. But, we can also look at the play, I think, as an exploration of approaches to revolution in the Caribbean. Yeah.
Yes.
So you have perhaps three different approaches. Yeah. You wish to comment on that?
Yeah, well, again, the comment, I mentioned it in the thing that TiJean, because remember, Walcott in that little bit in the beginning talks about a radical innocence, right? So that radicalism of TiJean, right? It's an innocence. If he was an older guy who had learned, who had imbibed these beliefs and developed the fear of God, the fear of the devil, the fear of dying, and all these different fears, fear of starvation, whatever the fears are, if he had developed them, he would have thought twice before he burnt the devil's cane down, right? He was a young fellow. Now, older people will do it, but they will have things behind their mind that, okay, you know, they can kill me if they want to, but I am going to go and do this. I just think in the play itself, TiJean is young and unformed. And to me, that is why if you contrast him with his brothers, whose belief was so ingrained and entrenched that they couldn't see other alternatives. And the only alternative is you see, this man is talking stupidness. I must go and stand up in the cane field and count all these cane, leave them, divide them by the number of stock, chase this goat around the place. No, man,
it's almost as though that that Walcott accepted that, yes, we needed a revolutionary change in the Caribbean, but how we go about it, and is there a humanistic approach to it? You know,
let the youth do it. You see, this is the thing.
Completely Gauguin way? Is it an intellectual TiJean way, or must it be? And of course, I mean, we have models. We have, you know, we're not going to go into that now, but we have Grenada. We have real revolutions that have happened in the Caribbean.
I agree with you,
and we have the repercussions.
Exactly. So that's why I said that.
Does TiJean speak to that as well?
Yes, it does. It does speak to it, and that's why I say that. But for a director, you have to choose which concept you're going to use and allow what I did, and I hope that what the production does and the script is so strong, and all these things that we're talking about now, the fact that we can talk about them is that we are seeing them in the actual writing, in the text, in the poetry of Walcott. So we see them there. So now if a director wants to say, okay, I like this engagement, I'm going to do this particular one where we talk about revolution. How do revolutionary acts, how do you stage them? And Walcott,
that interpretation
what Walcott did is that he made the innocent young fellow, he gave him the strength, and maybe he's saying it's the youth who has to pick this up. The old fellas who are ingrained in their beliefs, like TiJean, strength isn't going to do it, and book knowledge isn't going to do it. So, but you have to be a sort of a revolution, a person who is willing to take that on. And he did it, you know. So that's an angle, that's a layer of the play that a director could easily take and make a wonderful production out of it. Sure.
I wanted to put something out there just for you all to think about, but I'm wondering, Dr. Antoine, you want to say something? You're muted.
She's muted. Yeah.
You look like you wanted to say something. That's what I'm asking.
But we are not hearing your voice.
Yeah, I was just keying into the notion of the multiple layers of revolution, because in Moonchild he talks about TiJean with runaway, who has a runaway eyes, and Derek talks about the fact that the need to say no, the need to resist, and in fact to be on the edge of anarchy in order to resist those men in red, etc., so that he's actually advocating and layering the radicals and the revolutionaries and the anarchists from many different periods of time as he progresses in his development of both the stage play and the films that come out of TiJean.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very important comment and the relation between the two. Very important comment. Thank you very much, Dr. Antoine. What I wanted to put out there for us to think about, talking about layers, the concept of, at the beginning of the play, Mother is saying, wait, God will send something. And I think it's Grosjean says, God forget where he put us. And TiJean say, God too irresponsible. And you would think that it's a brave thing for someone to say. It's almost like in our culture, you feel that you're flying in the face of God. But when you look at the way the play goes, at the end of it, TiJean has won. Yeah, sure, his mother was praying for him and he took her advice, but he won. He overcame, he prevailed the devil on wit and cunning. And it comes back to the revolutionary. What is he using? And you've seen that. And if you look at what happened in 1970, a lot of people, the young people, and the comment was that it wasn't well thought out. They just acted on what they knew and what they felt. So I just wanted to put that out there, you know,
Yeah.
for comments or thoughts.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Well, actually, Jean did an interview, a short interview, that is Dr. Antoine, with Derek, you know, just before he passed. And it's interesting because
an hour-long interview.
Wow.
yeah, and actually, you know, he actually mentioned the word revolt when he was talking about TiJean. She asked him about TiJean.
Yeah.
And he remarked that there was some kind of protest happening at the time while they were speaking. So certainly the idea of revolt and protest was in his mind up till the very end when he was thinking about TiJean, and the whole idea of resisting the kind of materialism that impoverished and dispossessed the ordinary folk of the Caribbean. So I was happy, Jean, to get that interview,
yes.
to listen
I'm
to
sorry,
that interview.
Travis, it's there. I mean, if I can just say this, that again, the revolution thing and this whole, it's there because the Canboulay scene, when TiJean burns the cane, that whole picture of the field burning. That's the revolutionary act of slave rebellions throughout the Caribbean. And it is very much there. I mean, Walcott, it's, like I said, it's very much there. So in a production, when you play it, and I use a lot of like sort of cloth and silk with the dance and choreography with it. I'm sorry, I don't have a tape, but it's there so that any audience looking at it, I mean, unless you're terribly young and, you know, you haven't been schooled in any history, then you pick it up almost immediately. You may not know that it's Canboulay or the Canboulay riots or whatever, but you'll know immediately. And this is why I said that the script has it's there. Everything that you want about this play is right there. You just have to go a little bit. You know, sometimes you have to do a little digging. But
yeah, and that's what happened when before emancipation, the insurrections and the revolts. They always burned down the plantations and the great houses from Haiti right through all the insurrections that happened. So all these nuances and echoes, if you like, are there, and they are in the script. Yeah. When you talk about the layers, certainly, I mean, like you said too, one has to decide the directorial approach, because you can't do everything. So you decide what style or what approach or what you want to emphasize, and you go that way. But I just thought I would bring this up because it's not often spoken about, I find, when we speak of TiJean, and also in terms of Walcott, we don't always is that aspect of his work in terms of how he speaks for a certain section of the Caribbean. So yeah, I thought that would be interesting.
Yeah, but and last, finally, I wouldn't say anything after. The thing is, like I said, the reason why I said it's there is that it's this whole idea of the revolution and whatever they did, whatever Walcott knows it, and he tackles it in a lot of the poetry and these kinds of things. And so the choice that one make, you can do, as I said, you can do a play that covers this. It would be designed differently, you know, it would be produced differently, but that the focus would be on that. My focus, I wanted to focus this time on the fact that fear, even in the revolutions, even in the burning of the canes, even in the fact that when the music was banned, when Calypso was banned and so on, things could have been different, but we fear because we have certain cultural knowledge that's built into us, and we have knowledge of the world and of our lives and so on, and we develop a fear of death. And once you have a fear of death, then you're doomed. That's it. You know.
All right. Thank you.
Not
Thanks.
that I
Thanks.
don't
Thanks
have
a
it.
million.
I
Yeah,
haven't
great.
achieved that yet. I'm trying.
All right.
All right.
Thank you, Dr. So we had another production of TiJean done very recently, and I was really happy to have seen that production. You know, before the pandemic, I was able to take in some theater in Trinidad, and you know, quite a bit of theater, you know, at Napa, at Queen's Hall, at Little Carib, etc. And then the pandemic just mashed up everything. No, but we're getting back, right, in the Caribbean to theater.
Yeah.
And so I saw TiJean and his brothers at Queen's Hall, and that was produced by State and directed by Manuel himself, who's here with us. So yeah, so I was really pleased to see that production, and I'm happy to have you here to share with us your story of TiJean and his brothers, your story of Derek's play.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity, and that is a very long story. My relationship with TiJean and his brothers began when I got the opportunity to play that triptych role in 1995, I believe it was, to play the devil, the old man, and the planter. And it was a production directed by the late John Isaacs, and it was staged in St. Lucia at the outdoor theater at the time. And that was a huge deal for me to be a part of that piece. I mean, it was after getting the opportunity to do Dream on Monkey Mountain and Joker of Seville, and then to do this triple role. While some of the stalwarts were still around, Albert, who had done it before me, was there. So it really was a very potent, heady time. And I remember it was an incredible experience. It was a huge challenge. Being in St. Lucia as well was very inspirational and grounding for the piece. Its treatment was very green, and we played outdoors. And then after that, I stopped acting. I thought acting was very hard, and I did that part, and I felt satisfied, but not quite satisfied. That part was real hard. In that moment when you felt like you need to cry and you didn't quite cry, and you did it once in rehearsal and you tried to do it again in the performance, but you're pushing too hard or whatever. And as Henry says, there's so many layers, so many ways you could play this thing, so many ways, directions you could take it in. It's a very complex piece, but I found by being around it for a long time that if you couldn't approach it in that analytical, academic, overthinking way, the essence of the piece is a very simple story, an eternal story, a universal story, a very Creole story. You know, one of my experiences of working with Walcott is working with him at that stage of his life where he was really very comfortable with himself, and he had a lot to share, and we had a really good relationship. And he was always very much appreciative of what he called my classic and Creole sensibilities as an actor, and my ability to capture his language and his scanction and that sort of thing. And for years, you know, we'd always talk about his scanction, but me, I know what you're talking about, you know, but I was doing it apparently. So, but with TiJean, we went on to do a lot of work developing and exploring Moonchild, which is a whole next piece, which goes way much more into the devil and his sort of inner workings, and updates it and puts him in a European context. But while we were doing that, we were also in St. Lucia working with Dean Walton a lot and shooting little snippets of all kind of treatments. So, you know, I worked with so many TiJeans, they would all get too old before we went on to doing the next scene, and then we'd have to work with the next TiJean. I work in soufre. I get wrapped up in tinfoil and nearly burned to death in the volcano because Walcott wanted one more shot and Richard Montgomery was around. So my relationship with this piece is long and fraught. So when the opportunity to direct it came around, thanks to Anna and Lizzie, his daughters, and it was really fueled by the Walcott Festival that was initiated in Trinidad on the ground, celebration of his poetry, and it was thought, well, since the book was on the syllabus, the play was on the syllabus for CXC, we should remount TiJean for this new generation of you know, people who are encountering it for the first time. And the last time it was done was in 1995, so that was a long time ago. And I just so happened to be the guy who was doing it then. So it was very important that with this new opportunity to do it, I was bringing something new and fresh. And I was coming to it with what I thought a lot of understanding of the piece and not trying to overcomplicate it, overthink it. And also working on it after Derek's passing, it was with the knowledge of him as a person. And, you know, Derek writes grand language, but he told the corniest jokes. He was the most regular fella. He liked, you know, when they played and played big. If I was doing a scene that he particularly liked, he would make me do it 100 times and calling people to see it. Sometimes he wasn't so attentive to a lot of detail, but he was really interested in the big storytelling approach. And, you know, there was a quote that I often quote from him where he says, I come from a place that likes grandeur. It likes large gestures. It is not inhibited by flourish. It is a rhetorical society. It's a society of physical performance. It's a society of style. And he went on to say that, you know, as a child growing up, when they did poems, they would recite it with gusto and they would literally shout them and chant them. And then, you know, Dr. Brian, you know, my understanding is that Derek clearly had a very solid understanding of our folk theater tradition. And he speaks to that where, you know, the idea of music, chanting, singing, dancing, movement was integral to the storytelling. And I was struck by that.
I want to give you a word, Wendell. I want to give you a word. There's a word we use for that called blage. You know, when you say, so we say blage.
Blage.
You know, the exuberance and the large gestures. Verbal and physical expression.
And he likens it to, you know, to the skill of a Calypsonian and Calypsonian having to be like a matador, and you have to come on, you can't half step, and you have to come big. So I say, hey, I like that. I'm taking that as an approach stylistically. That is who we are. You know, you look at our folk theater tradition and you look at it from another POV and you say, oh God, why everybody's so larger than life and always have the gesture and quiet mouth and, you know, make sounds in between and whatnot. But that's how the story comes to life through when it comes through us. The other thing that I was struck by was the patois and the chant, the use of the chant especially. And of course, over the years, I've evolved as a rhapsodman, as a songwriter, as a musician. So, and the music, you know, working on the first TiJean, the biggest impact for me was the fact that it wasn't just a play, but it was a musical, which is a whole next thing, you know, and in musical things happen, boom, we'd have to explain, you know, it's magic. So I thought that, you know, my approach to this whole piece was not to sort of over-explain nothing or present no overly big theme, but to get to the heart of telling a story, a very crucial story, a eternal story, a timeless story. And the one big bold decision I made was to not set it in a green setting, but to take that idea of the jungle or the deep forest as a metaphor for the urban junglescape and an urban landscape. And to set the whole thing, very funny enough, when I look at your setting, Henry, very much the same, you know, it's a Gael. It's an arena where the whole scene is action is played out, and it has all these levels, and the devil's dominion is at the top, and you make your way down to that ground level, and the mother is off to the side in isolation, just cut off from everything, because one of the things we explored in Moonchild was the whole idea is that the mother had this little piece of land that she was holding out from the devil and was the last little missing piece of the puzzle that he wanted to just control everything. But her stubbornness, her faith was what really irked him beyond. And then, of course, who knows what the dynamic of the relationship with her was vis-a-vis the Bulam and all that kind of thing. He wanted to crawl back up her skirt. So all these things are there, you know, and they're there to be used. They're there to add delight and to add the magical, mystical flair to the piece. One of the things I discovered in this mother was that she wasn't this old frail thing, you know. She's the one, when you look at the line, she's the one that introduces very political ideas in their head about the unfairness of the planter and the white man having all this thing and fancy flesh and eating on golden plates, and here they are, you know, scrimping and saving. You know, she obviously puts something in her boy's head. Is how they turn it out, how they interpret it is a whole other thing. And that whole idea, Henry, about, you know, being driven by or captured by our fear, presenting this for a modern audience where we don't afraid devils no more, as we say in one of our songs, you know, is like, you know, the whole idea of presenting folk devils and a folk story. I thought, nah, we had to bring this devil more into here and now. And somehow the devil kind of ended up feeling like a gang leader. And we have a lot of that gang violence in East Urban Port of Spain and Laventille, the hills, and they come down from the hills and they come into the forest of Port of Spain. And then the devil is somewhere over like where I live in Woodbrook, in the broader, more expansive space kind of thing. So we could find a place fit to fit. And then that led to treatment stylistically where, you know, Sarah Woodham was coming with stuff, but it was, she's the daughter of Greg Jones Woodham, who had worked on one of the previous productions that I was in along with Catherine Chang in designing it, which had a very spear kabuki-esque kind of treatment. And I think I took a lot of that spearness into this production. And I inherently like working with what I call the empty space and just a couple layers and conjuring a world based on that. And for me, the idea of a strong anchoring symbol or motif was the moon, this magical moon that is always there. You know, the frog says the moon is always there. So you may not see it right now, but it's there. So this moon you could see bright at times. It was hazy, it was blue, it was blood red when one of the boys get eaten. So this moon just backdrop everything. TiJean first appears in front of the moon and sings his song to start the show. The whole idea of the boy in the moon or the man in the moon, of course, we know is not a new idea. We know is Caliban, the Tempest, his first appears. And once again, that whole idea of Derek being mischievous and playing with classical and Creole, for me, is par for the course. I just took those things, I just assumed those things as givens in our toolbox to play with, you know, as Caribbean actors, as Caribbean people. It's part of what we have at our disposal to tell our stories. So wanting to tell this very Caribbean story here and now with resonances here and now, stripping away the overly folkiness of it, playing with the inherent potency of the folk character, the Papa Bois character, the wise old man, the planter who symbolize in another time that colonial planter with the British accent. You know, when I did it, that's what I did, very clipped British accent. That's what Derek loved, the pit helmet and everything. That's how we interpreted it. And how you doing, Joe? And using that to really annoy Gaujean. Just understanding that that's all you had to do. Just don't get his name right. And that's enough to totally emasculate him, bring him down, all that big arm iron he have. You know, the other part of the story that I was struck by is that this is a every man journey. Is what path you're going to take, right? That Gaujean says there's a time for every man to leave his mother and father, to leave everybody know him march a grave he won. It's just what approach you take. Gaujean thought it was his arm of iron and his strength and his pride in himself and his pride in his manhood. And of course, the devil, you know, had a response to that. Mija with his book. I love the book. I love the idea of this book that Mija has. Where does book come from? What kind of book it is? This book have every knowledge it have. I mean, if you were to take that seriously, you know, it's a magic book. It's a magic show. It's a magic play, you know. So on a certain level, I would say to the actors, you know, come on, Saturday morning cartoons, keep the energy up, keep the story going forward, keep what it is you want, you know, what's in your way, what blocking you from getting that, how do we physicalize that, how do we get there, you know? For me, and then the other thing, as I said, was to really play the scansion hard in the first piece and to give the animals, the storytellers of the piece, to give them the power to set up this very hard frame of rhythm and the band to comp it almost in a kind of hypnotic way until so that when it breaks, you feel the relief of it and the rest of the play emerges in a naturalistic as way as possible with the numbers in between, using the mood of the lighting and the bareness of the space to conjure those transitions, you know, to get that Andre Tantes flute feeling still in the middle of it, even though it was pretty gritty and urban, because our band had one of them sequences in it with, you know, beats in it, you know, urban beats. So, I mean, some people might have thought it sacrilegious to take Andrew Tanker's music and give it some urban scrunching beats behind it, but I didn't. And I say, having had the benefit of working very closely with the two men, Andre would come to me with, the latest band out there. What did I think of this or that? I was like, Andre, I younger than you, but you're introducing me to stuff. He was never sort of stuck in a mode. And I didn't want coming to a piece 25 years later to feel nostalgic or try to evoke certain feeling or, what I did, but to communicate and capture the energy, the magic, the power, the potency of the story for now. And for me, the proof of the pudding was in the reception by the target audience. This is the children. They bawled, they screamed, they hollered, they hooted, they shouted down TiJean when he said women have no brains. That didn't happen when I did it. So it's like a whole different generational response to this thing. The whole idea of the mother being a little more empowered, that wasn't the way it happened when we did it 25 years ago. Now it made perfect sense for the mother to, not be so frail. The whole idea of the storytellers, these animals, they were, for me, like, we have a real street people problem here. We have, in various states of mental states and states of dress and how they present themselves, real characters. Trinidad is the land of mass and carnival and everything. So
yeah,
every day is something played mass.
Just one sec. We have the visuals.
You do all right, yes.
Yeah,
you can show some of it behind there. This is a clip. Will you show me a little clip?
Yeah, so we have the video clip with you.
Right, so this is the world that I spoke of, just this bare cockpit, this arena where everything was played out. That's the mother's house off to the side, and then in the back there, the moon watching over everything else and everything playing off in that arena. These are the animals telling the story, bringing the world alive. These street people who see everything, people pass them every day, kick them, spit at them, they'll take them on. We also had some girls in town who were there to witness everything, like a Greek chorus, Gina and Dinah, Rosita and Clementina kind of thing, watching the action. And then, these are the animals again in detail, Sarah Jones' interpretation, with the way they were styled, the bird with the hairpiece there and the frog in the back there with the green elements and the firefly and the cricket in front here. And the little graves that were part of the set that appeared every time our brother was, so really as abstract as possible, almost Japanese anime-esque, and so many of the young people now, they live in that anime world. So it was one of the things I think they could relate to from a stylistic point of view. What's the next one you have there? You want to show the little clip? You could get a sense of the sound and the feel of it. You could ignore me talking in between because I basically tell the same story that everybody knows.
Right. Yeah, I think TiJean is onto it. Yeah, TiJean, the video clip. Right, but it's okay. Great.
My name is Wendell Manwaran, and I'm the director as well as the sound designer of TiJean and His Brothers. Well, TiJean and His Brothers is a classic Walcott piece of a story of three brothers, a mother with three sons, and they all have to face the devil. The devil sends one of his agents, the Bolom, to let them know that the devil is challenging each of the brothers to a test, and whoever manages to make the devil feel anger, rage, or human weakness, he will reward them. He will fill their bowl with a shower of sovereigns. But whichever one of your sons fails to give me these feelings, then that one will be eaten. So basically he says, the sons must come out in the order of their birth age. Grosjean, the first son, Mija, the middle son, and then TiJean. And the bet is whoever make the devil feel or get him vexed, they win. And if the devil get them vexed, they will be eaten. Oh, this play is very relevant because it's our You know, I love the fact that this story begins by telling you exactly what happens in the end of the story. The frog says,
if you look in the moon, don't know moon is here tonight. There's a man. No, a boy.
and God put him there because he beat the devil to light the evil dark and guide us all on our way. So it's actually a very powerful symbol for us. The idea of the man in the moon is a universal symbol. And Walker was always very clear that, you know, we had an opportunity to take some of these same imagery, some of these same ideas, and apply it to us. So the man in the moon first appears in The Tempest, Shakespeare's The Tempest, and he deliberately took that and made it Caribbean. Now, TiJean is already a Caribbean folk story. So the marriage of a classical image with this Caribbean folk story of these three boys who have to fight the devil, you know, is, for me, is perfect. What Walker was always about: classic Creole, classical and Creole. And for me, that's what this story is about. And that struggle is part of our struggle to find that balance. And also, it's an eternal story, because at some point in every body life, as TiJean says, you have to leave your mother and father and leave everybody you know and march to the grave, me one.
There's a time for every man to leave his mother and father, to leave everybody he know and march to the grave he won. There's a time for every man to leave his brother and sister, to add his force to the world and march to the grave he won. We won, to leave everybody we know and march to the grave he won.
So the whole idea of leaving home and finding your path is a big part of the story. It's a question of how you find your path. So the first son is big and strong, and he figure that is all he needs. You know, he have armor, iron, and an axe, and anything he bunks up, he chopping and pushing, and you know. Of course, that doesn't work. The devil eats him. The second son have this book. God knows where he get his book from. He's really a fisherman, but he spends more time reading the book than fishing. And he just has dreams of escaping, being elsewhere. You know, he says he's on his way to England to become a rich lawyer. The land worked too hard.
I on my way to the sea to become a rich captain. I on my way to England to buy platform and dinners, then to become a lawyer. The land worked too hard.
And he has a very affected tone about him and considers himself above all this. And of course, he thinks he could outwit and outsmart the devil, and that doesn't work. The devil eats him. The last son is TiJean. When the mother says to TiJean, "What did you do today?"
Mama, my fair Oriel. Mama, I didn't do a thing.
And that's TiJean's only line for the first half of the play. TiJean is a beautiful dreamer. He's looking at everything, he's curious about life, he's taking in everything, but he hasn't even his personality isn't fully formed yet. His mother tells him, "You're too merry, your spirit's too merry." But the difference between TiJean and the other two brothers is that he actually listened to his mother. You know, she says, when you go out there, talk to the animals. If you meet the animals, befriend them, listen to what they have to say. You'll bounce up an old man. His name is Worldly Wisdom. Be careful. The devil could appear in all kinds of guises. So TiJean is the only one who really clocked from early when he meets the old man, hey, you could be the devil. The others are so full of themselves that they don't even realize that they're selling out themselves by telling the old man all their plans when they meet the planter. And the idea of the devil incarnating as the devil, the planter, and the old man is also quite sophisticated and quite funny and quite engaging. You know, it's a real thrill. The characters in the piece, the way the whole piece is set up, it's a non-stop thrill.
Yeah, wonderful. We can continue with the visuals as you speak to them. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, apart from the story, as I say, one of the most exciting things to me was to forge a connection between the young audience of now and this timeless story. And I felt that that was done successfully. Their response to it was tremendous. Their understanding of it was tremendous. We did lots of feedback sessions. Even after the production was staged, we would go to the schools and do lots of questioning and giving and taking. And so many people, the main thing that I got from it is that when they were given the play to study, they didn't understand it, they didn't appreciate it, they couldn't find a entry point, and they're seeing the story come alive, literally did that for them. It made it come alive. So for me, I think that's one of the most important things I undertake to do when I do a piece of work. And I guess that's informed by the fact that a lot of the work that I do over the years has been with Lilliput Children's Theatre. We just finished a piece called Question, which is just a series of explorations of what they've been through and what they went through for the last 2 years of lockdown, and now coming together for the first time after 2 years. And I thought that was pretty strong and potent and very movement-based and poetic in their own right. And it's the same kind of spirit in which this piece was undertaken. And as I say, not trying to overthink or because I agree with Henry, all those themes are in there, all those issues are in there. And it's like that Martin Carter poem, the more the men of our time we are, the more our time is. You find those themes that resonate for the time. That revolution theme, it resonated very strongly in the 70s, and it's there, it's inherently there. TiJean in business, that one of the lines when he says, all you niggas working in the field, when he shouts that line out, it's like a lash of a whip, and Walcott uses language like that sometimes, which in the context is it's meant to shock you and hit you a lash across the back. There are times when the devil refers to Black people in a very lashing, cutting, scathing way. And, you could feel Gauguin's pain every time he didn't call him by the right name because it was so deliberately and so intense. And even, getting Mijan to enter the argument. Mijan was doing pretty well, keeping his mouth shut and making his signs until the goat came into the discussion. And the goat, this time around, became a whole other character. I remember seeing a production that Tony Hall had done many, many moons ago, where the goat literally ran through the entire theater, all in between people, and caused a commotion. And then came back on stage, and I never forgot that. Never, that goat went on that. And then when we did it in St. Lucia too, John allowed the goat to go on the rampage.
Free rein.
Yeah. And it's one of the funniest moments in the play, and you can really play it for what it is. It's very, very funny. And the young man who played the goat this time around, I think he brought a whole other energy to this goat, to the point where the goat was not just a goat anymore. So the magic in the piece was what really appealed to me, and the opportunity to bring that magic out, in as potent a way as possible, using all the elements that the old man said was part of our tradition: the singing, the chanting, the dancing, the bigness, the grandeur, the flourish. Those were the things that I emphasized.
I think when I saw it, I thought that it was very musical. Very, you were definitely that was what you were going for, and it worked for me. I think it was light to some extent, and I think that the children delighted in that because they latched onto the musicality and the lightness, and light in terms of the movement as well of the performance. How they quickly darted and moved into place, the ease of movement and style. So quite valid in terms of what approach one uses. I mean, my own experience. I mean, we did TiJean a long time ago. I took it to Caribbean Focus in London. I played one of the T-Jabs. It was directed by Fish Alphonse. Kennedy Boots Samuel played the devil. But it was a kind of production where we really emphasized that revolution there. And so that was a long time ago. Subsequent to that, we actually. I say we, I'm talking this time about my father, Alan Weeks, and myself. We did a Creole this version, he translated into Creole, and we did that at Alliance Française, and Derek came to see it. We did regular productions in Creole, and he came to see it, and it's really, really, really loved the production. You know, the Creole, the French Creole translation of his work. So I think, you know, when we as a theater classic of the Caribbean, I think we acknowledging as well the immense possibilities, like Henry had said about the layers, the immense possibilities that one can do. So which means that, you know, TiJean is not finished and will never be finished in terms of the possibilities, what can be done with it.
For me, the inherent timelessness of the story, that story of the mother with the three sons and each having to go out there and face the devil, and there's a question of how. You know, and as the devil says, he who with the devil tries to play fair weaves the net of his own despair. It's the story of, you know, for everybody and every time to deal with on a certain degree. And, you know, I was also back to the musical side of it. The second act of the piece is actually more of an opera than a play. You know, the way it's constructed, it starts off with a big number with Abaja, Labaje, Marty Mama, and what Papa Boaja cooked today and all that, and Feed the Devil the Third, and the mother has 2 songs with TiJean, and then they call TiJean outside, and, you know, he meets the animals, and it's non-stop music, and it just takes you all along to the big number where TiJean makes the devil cry. So the idea of it being, you know, driven and informed by the music, especially when it comes to Act 2, it's there in the piece. I mean, some choose to play it up, and others could just sort of use to treat it as incidental. But I saw it was important for the rhythm and the drive and the dynamic of the piece.
Very delightful, really delightful. I enjoyed it. And I went to a student production. The children around me were really much into it, really enjoyed it. Yeah, so great, thanks for that.
Thanks.
Good, Wendell. So we still here with you. Yes, Carol, you in charge?
Yeah, we're 7 minutes to 8, and I know we have to go into Dr. Antoine, but I wondered if Dr. Greiner had a very short comment or question, because he seemed like he wanted to say something. Yes.
Well, I can say lots of things, but one thing I would like to say is what we're talking about is the amazing freedom that Walcott allows himself in this particular play. It's not true of a lot of his work.
Mm-hmm.
More restricted in things like Walker or Last Carnival, things like that. But here he just lets all this happen, and he's comfortable about doing that. It's really wonderful to see. Dream is similar, but this is a more compact play in certain ways, so it's more visible. And that's the thing that I get. Just one other thing to say. When I'm teaching plays to any students, I say 2 things. One of them is, when you read a play, you are not the audience, you are the director. They've not thought of that. And it's why they don't get anything out of them. But the next thing you say is, okay, we talk about this play. You can come up with all kinds of possible interpretations that it might be carrying. Which ones work on stage? Which Henry's been saying too. You know, the test is, will this work on stage? Can you get this across the footlights, this reading? Or do you have to have somebody carry out a sign and say, what this is about is this? You don't want to do that. That's my bit.
Thanks, thank you, Professor. All right, so Carol, shall we engage Dr. Antoine now?
Definitely, and just 2 seconds, Wendell. I know TiJean is still on the CSEC syllabus, so if you all can probably try for another production next year, that'll be fantastic for students. Yeah.
Well, you know, the whole thing is that the idea is that as long as it's on the syllabus, it could have been remounted, but then of course COVID happened. So
yeah, well, next year, you know.
But it has been recorded, so hopefully it's available to them in that format.
Okay. All right. Thank you again so much, Dr. Antoine. Floor is yours.
Right, yeah, so Dr. Jean Antoine Dunn, of course, in your introductions, you mentioned about her book on Walcott's love affair with film. And I know that she is familiar with some of the work or the attempts that Walcott has made in terms of filming, getting some of his plays filmed. And I was speaking with Dean Walton, and he said that he spent 9 years working with Walcott to film TiJean and his brothers. I know Wendell would have been part of that process as well. So So we have Jean, and in my discussions with Jean, prior to this, one of the concerns I had basically was that, there's a kind of progressive linkage that happens with theater and film in several parts of the world. I mean, in the UK, in the US, and it does not in any way detract from the validity of theater. Classic plays get their full run, and they're always done, even when films are made of them. But I mean, the theater offers the space for training, for honing of skills, for honing of scripting and workshopping and so on. So it brings that, it contributes that to the world of film, that kind of these resources. But yet in the Caribbean, we've not reached there. We have theater classics, we have, and we have not reached there. Someone who had that kind of immense talent at Walcott and who had these plays, we don't have his plays on film, but there were attempts. So that is a kind of concern that I had, and I'm happy to have Jean, I know, who has done the research and can speak with us, and hopefully we can have Dean Walton, who I spoke with yesterday, join us in and engage in the discussion with. So thank you, Dr. Antoine. Please.
Okay, thanks for that. First of all, I don't think there's a necessary trajectory from stage drama to film, because I think there have been many dramatic productions turned into films. There have also been many filmings of dramatic productions, but the two are very distinct arts and very distinct art forms. And there might be a simple reason why many Caribbean classics have not been made into film, and that is that we might in fact lack script writers who understand the differences between the dramatic art, stagecraft, and the art of film. The formal structures of film, or even the theory of film. And one of the things that we attempted to do when we first started the film program was in fact to get our would-be directors and producers to understand that film is an art form, and that it has been very, very heavily theorized, and there have been many experiments dating back to the very beginnings of film in the way that film can combine the world of reality and the world of illusion, but much more, but beyond that, the way that film actually creates what we call affect, the way that film affects us, and affects us physically, physiologically. And that may, in fact, that lack of knowledge may in fact be one of the reasons that our film, our stage classics have not, or dramatic works have not been turned into film. I asked Derek the question, and he said it was a lack of money. He said that we were all Philistines in the Caribbean, and that he couldn't get people to give him the money to make the films that he wanted. It has also been suggested to me by some of his longtime actors that one of the problems that Derek had in turning his works or producing films, and I'm thinking very specifically of something like, say, Vangelo Nero, is that he was just too fond of words. And films need strong narratives, but they also need images, because you're creating concrete ideas through the visual images that you're presenting on screen. You're building up an ideational line, not by the use of words, but by the use of the things that you see, the things that you hear, and the kinds of relationships that you're creating through these lines. So I think that those are some of the reasons that perhaps we have not seen Derek's works, but we know that in many instances, Derek thought of works that became film, that became stages, dramatic productions like Steele. He thought of them initially as films. In fact, the script for Steele was initially a film script. And yes, TiJean has been worked on many, many times for many years. I think the earliest version of a film script that I've seen of TiJean is, I think, 1970, and it was an animated film. which is actually quite a beautiful film, you know, and a musical, again with Andre Tanker. Why he did not actually make this, I have no way of knowing. I did actually ask him, he didn't answer. So, but what I would like to do, perhaps, having seen the fragments that Dean Walton has put up into the public domain, and which in fact are, I suppose, a combination of pieces of filming in St. Lucia, is to suggest that some of the primary lessons that Derek learned about film over the years, you might actually find in those fragments. One of the things that we find throughout the course of his work on film, his film scripts from no matter which one you're looking at, whether it's Pantomime, Vangelo Nero, Babylon, is his fondness for the use of the montage cut. And of course, what the montage cut does is to allow different dissonance, to allow separate or often contrasting ideas or images to come together to clash. And we see this very much so happening in the filmed fragments that we have of TiJean. So there are quite a number of cuts throughout the version that I have seen. The other thing that Derek was exceptionally fond of was the close-up. Now, the close-up in film is used to create profound psychological impact, because when you bring the camera close, you can create a sense of the psychology of the action or the psychology of the individual, but it is also a very profound vehicle for emotion. And one of Derek's kind of favorite ideas was that the camera sees beyond the normal eye or beyond the human eye. And in using the close-up, you are able to glean from that face or that portion of the body an impact or a far deeper or more sense of what is actually happening within that individual, but also that the use of the close-up allows us to see the inherent beauty of a thing and to go beyond our preconceived notions of that thing. And he talked about this very, very specifically in relation to the Black body and the Black female body, in particular Black face. He says, when I was filming in St. Lucia, I looked through the camera eye and I saw this woman, and wow, the beauty of it was awe-inspiring. And what we have in the fragments of TiJean, in particular in relation to the mother and the mother's fondling or hugging of TiJean, what we have is the camera actually caressing the mother. But it is also, what it is also doing is exploring the beauty of the Black skin. And you might remember that the true light of the world in Arkansas Testament, where he talks about the true beauty of the world. And you might also think in relation to Omeros and Helen's beauty and the use of the close-up in Omeros as an epic poem. So that the use of the close-up is fulfilling three very different objectives. It is allowing him to explore the emotions that the mother feels, to go into the archetypal story, to understand the depth of meaning, the moral purpose behind it as well, the psychological impact of the devil, but also to think through the kinds of ideas that he has really been ruminating over over his entire life. And how does one express, how does one find a mechanism, a way of exploring the true is, the true reality, the true beauty of the individual, of the Black person in the Caribbean, or the Caribbean person. We talk about creolization, we talk about, but what he's actually saying is, what is the is of the Antilles? And the is of the Antilles is for him being explored through the camera eye, because the camera is able to see this much more beyond what we normally see. And this is also, the camera is also able to explore the figural movement, the use of gesture, but also the way that the black body moves and moves within a frame, and combine that with the music, with the movement of other lines to suggest a kinetism, a force field that is actually what he considers to be the vitality of the Caribbean expressiveness. Because I think that what Walcott moved towards, certainly as he moved beyond Ross and into a play like a poem like The Prodigal, is that words in themselves can't fully express the immense potential, the many facets of Caribbean being, its isness. What you need to do is to do somewhat similar. I think both Lawrence and Wendell have mentioned the kabuki. How do you get all of these different sense perceptions? How do you bring them together so that they are all channeled, so that the audience can actually feel, can actually understand and get the full impact of that force field? And the other, and so this is also what he's doing through the use of the camera, but also through the use of the frame, so that by putting these various lines, in terms of what we call the contrapuntal play of lines, by bringing all these elements together within the frame, he's actually projecting or creating a force field of that isness, of that Antillean, if you want, its vitality. Now, the other thing that film theorists or film theory draws our attention to is the fact that a film is a projection in time. It is a projection in time through light. And the impact of light is one that causes vibrations. So light is a vibratory force. And that vibratory force is the thing actually that shapes those impulses that give it its power. That's one of the theories that we work with in montage theory. And because the stage doesn't actually, can only, well, I suppose it can simulate it, but it cannot provide that the fullness of that impact. What Walcott does in the filmed version or the filmed fragments of TiJean is to use light both to create that sense of vibration and to use it as a metaphor. And there are two particular instances. One, when Papa Bois is lying down. Well, first of all, when we see Papa Bois, there's a kind of a play of light, and it's a very deliberate play of light, so that it aligns Papa Bois through that use of light, aligns him to the forest. And of course, that also reminds us that TiJean was initially influenced by Akira Kurosawa's Rashomon, the figure, in particular, the figure of the silent woodsman, which we also find in Malcauchen. But the use of light is also a kind of a process of superimposition. So when we see the planter appearing, the play of light on the planter recalls for us the words of the preacher, Robert Lee's playing the part of the preacher in the film fragments, who draws our attention, who focuses our attention on the beauty of Lucifer, his seductiveness. There is also, and the plant is actually constantly being played with through the use of light. So he's both a resplendent figure, and he's also a figure who is literally vibrating through the use of light. So that the light is both something that is happening as a result of the fact that it is a projection, but it is also something that is reinforcing the idea that Lucifer is a beautiful figure of light. The mother says that her husband was also very beautiful, so there's a sense of envy there. But that Lucifer is not just as is a figure who exists within the planter, and who is somebody who is also rather oddly at one with TiJean, who is also a rebellious figure. So they're both rebels. And part of the seductiveness, or part of the problem of the devil, or the planter figure who is the devil, is that he too is saying no. He too is a rebellious figure. He's the great rebel. He said no to God, just as TiJean is saying no. And you know, TiJean is a kind of a trickster figure in the film, in the bits of the film that we see. He kind of teases and he mamagizes him and he plays with him and he tells him, you know, you can't, you know, he literally says no. So they become two sides of the one. And so the folkloric element of the play moves beyond that of the folk tale, and becomes a biblical story, becomes aligned to a biblical story, and then becomes aligned to the story of plantocracy and the story of slave rebellion, etc., which is what I was talking about or referring to earlier when I talked about the various layers that are being shaped and formed with in the play in relation to this idea of rebelliousness, or this idea of saying no. And I'm just going to end up by saying that the notion of superimposed layers is something that Walcott gets very much from film, because film, he has a theory of simultaneity, the past and present coexisting, which we see very much in terms of the film's sequences again in Omeros and even in The Prodigal. The past can be made to coexist. And this is something that film can do. Film can actually superimpose the past on the present, or it can juxtapose the past on the present. And through that process of juxtaposition, it can force us to a new idea, to a new realization of its relationships. So that the version, or the film version of TiJean is actually the last film version of TiJean is actually a progressive movement of the 1957 play TiJean, which has gone through all the mutations, all the shaping of ideas, all the transformations of thought that have been happening within the poetry, and moves us to this point where it is actually seeking to address all of these, if you want, philosophical ideas, Lawrence, of that Walcott has been grappling with through filmic means, because he has already been attempting to address these philosophical questions through filmic means in his earlier work, such as Omeros and such as The Prodigal, by inserting bits of film by inserting montage, by inserting the close-up, by inserting superimposition, etc., etc., within his poetic works.
Right, thank you. Wow, yes, close analysis here. Good. Right. Now, you know, one of the persons that I mentioned earlier, Dean Walton, was very much involved with the work in TiJean. I think he's on, and I'd like him to come in just to share with us some of the delight, you know, the delightful experiences that he had working and filming TiJean. Yes, Dean.
You want me to tell you how delightful it was? Hello, everybody. Wendell, it's nice to see you. I miss you.
Yeah, likewise, Dean. Always good to see you.
Yeah. Boy, I tell you, listening to all this brings back a lot of memories, of course, and it's a lot to unpack really in a short period of time. But the conversation about the layers and the complexity and all of those things are very, very accurate in the way he was approaching the film. And as Jean said, the script itself went through several series of evolution to the point at the end, the final script that we were working with. He had added, actually, I want to say 12 new musical sequences or musical numbers. Some of them were quite short, but some of them were expanded onto Andre's original, I think it was 9 or 10 that he had for the original play. And Boo Hinkson worked on those. I think Wendell, didn't you do some of the voice at some time?
Yeah,
for
we
that?
actually recorded quite a couple tracks, and we went to New York and recorded something there
Right,
as well.
that's right. Yeah, you were in New York. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
So anyway, as Jean was saying, as the years went by and we came close to getting the money, but then for usually the reason, quite frankly, that people backed out of the money was someone somewhere on the business side could never really grasp the importance of the language, of the dialogue, and the essence of the Caribbean that was so important to what Derek wanted to convey. And they would offer to have somebody come in and help him rewrite the script. Well, it was a deal breaker every time because he had spent an enormous amount of time preparing it and creating it, as you all know, in the words that he wanted to use to convey, especially through the dialogue.
And
The
he
other
liked
aspect, sorry?
he liked to be in charge.
Oh, yeah, he was in charge. There was no question about that. But one of the things that was the beauty of it is that, as you were talking about the philosophical, the symbolism, the all of the aspects, the layers of the story itself, the film gave him the opportunity to expand on it and develop a backstory for all of the characters. But the underlying, to me at least, was the colonial, the oppression, and basically the capitalistic greed destroying the essence of the Caribbean and the Caribbean people. And it was a revolt. It was a revolt. The whole concept, the whole idea, to me at least, was revolting against destroying the beauty, the natural beauty, the cultural beauty, the beauty of the people, as Jean was talking about. And to me, that was the message all along. The animals were both animals, but they also became in human form. The blackbird turned into the singer in the lounge. The firefly was turned into the night watchman at the Devil's Plantation. So the whole thing was about the universal connectedness and everything. So, but every minute that I got to spend on it, and especially looking back on it now, I can't even express how lucky I feel to have been so close and working so close with Derek, and all the experiences that we had together, the struggles that we had trying to raise the money, not understanding why we couldn't get the money. It just never made sense to me that somebody didn't step up, and we weren't asking for a huge amount. The sad part is the technology now has caught up with where, if we had the same technology that we have now with the cameras and the ability, we could have shot the film on a very low budget and still come away with something spectacular. But we were still shooting film. That's how long ago this was. That's why everything is in the 4:3 format. And just to point out, Jean, the segments are basically, they were video storyboards of scenes. We did hundreds of them over, as Wendell can attest. I'll never forget that day you were melting in the aluminum. Richard had you at the aluminum foil there.
Yeah,
But
because Richard.
Richard was a character. But we spent what, 6-7 days there at Ladera. We did readings. We and the whole cast and crew and everybody. It was just magical. And every time we got together, it was really magical. And that's the frustrating part of not being able to finally achieve the dream of making the film. But the story, I think, is even more relevant now, as we have Cabot here developing the north end of the island. We had the horse racing track, and it's mind-boggling to me that so-called developers look at a piece of pristine forest and see a hotel or see a condominium, and that's what Derek, and I think that's why Derek and I connected so well. The first time we met was in '97, I think it was. He came down to, I was going to do an interview for the TiJean management to get it established as a World Heritage Site, which we were ultimately successful in doing. But that day, we were on the back of the boat with the pitons in the background, and he was expressing, and then we got to talking. We became instant friends, and then he found out that I had been in the film business, done a couple of short films, And that's when we started talking about TiJean. I think it was 2000, late 99 or early 2000, when we first really started in earnest trying to push forward. But, you know, meeting Wendell, for example, I got to meet Arthur Miller and Seamus Henry and people I would have never met in any other way that I got to meet, and seeing all of you here, some of you I've met before. Just that experience, I can't even describe how lucky I feel to. The only regret is that we weren't able to get the film made. And I still, there's a glimmer of hope that one day somehow we'll all come back together in one way or another. But as I told Wendell years ago, we have to stay true to the words that he wrote. That was the whole point. So if we ever do make the film, it has to be with those words, not some Hollywood person coming in and rewriting.
Some treatment.
God,
Yeah.
no, God, no, God, no, no, no.
Exactly.
No.
So anyway, I don't know.
I know a lot of the ideas led to the evolution of Moonchild, which
Exactly.
is a whole other thing too.
Very obviously so as well.
Yeah, Moonchild definitely. Well, it kind of was an act of frustration because we were seeing this close, and then we had the meeting, and the lady started off. Okay, well, the first thing we want to do is send a scriptwriter down. Boom, the meeting was over. I mean, it didn't end that way, but you could tell by the body language and everything, the meeting was over. And so I kind of lost my train of thought there, but we didn't get the money there, and he was frustrated. And I can't remember exactly, but there was a spark, and then that's where Moonchild came up. He said, let's do something with all of this. And there was I think it was in Italy, or I can't remember.
Yeah, we had the opportunity to go to Rome.
Rome, right.
And it was first presented in Rome, and then he got picked up at Essex for a couple of years, and that's when we went on to do that.
But the thing, I think the thing in Rome, he had to come up with something there was some sort of commitment that he had. So Moonchild was born out of that, but it came right out of all the efforts that we put into to TiJean and everything. So
Moonchild is very political.
Yeah, very political. Yeah.
Extremely.
Yeah. So
I
don't know what else I can add. I could talk about it for hours. There's so many different things, but the essence of the film, like you were talking about the light, the island itself was one of the stars of the film in Derek's mind, especially the pitons and Soufriere, but also the people and the culture, the richness of the culture. These were all elements that he wanted to bring to the film, and was so passionate about that, and keeping it true and realistic. But again, the underlying message was his disdain for developers and the lack of appreciation for all those things I just mentioned. And that's the story that I was trying to bring out in everything we shot and everything we did.
Yeah, I think I think that sorry, Jean, go ahead.
I just want to ask a very quick question, because Dean and I met in St. Lucia when I was working on my documentary, and it just didn't work out because of the whole. But is there enough? I do Eisenstein, and when he died, he was doing Que Viva Mexico, and after he died, was put together as a film. Is it possible? Do you have enough footage to put together? If somebody who knew maybe Wendell understood what, and you have a script, would it be possible to put it together, to make to edit it a full?
Oh no, we don't have too many scenes like the goat scene that you were talking about. We rehearsed that goat scene several times there at Fondue Estate, and it's a hilarious scene, but we never got the chance to shoot it because I can't remember who was playing TiJean at the time. Couldn't make it for some reason, had to leave the island, and so we never shot that scene. The Bolum scene, we never shot that scene. There's just too many things that we never actually shot. We were trying to build a bridge. We never shot anything with TiJean, now that I think about it, or at least nothing in real formal. I mean, there was a lot of stuff that we shot like with just a single camera, or just more or less to use for rehearsal, to evaluate everybody's performance, that we never. But it was never of any quality that we could use for editing. Right. So what you're seeing, there's a couple of clips that are not in the one that I posted, but really no. I mean, I would love to. It's all weird. It's almost like the whole film is there, but we couldn't do it.
Okay.
Really
all right, guys, Yeah, my indicated to me that we really running quickly. We might have, if our panelists can, we might have to go over a few minutes if we can, maybe 15 more minutes, because there's still one topic that I would like to cover. So do stay on, Dean, because it's sad it didn't happen, but the experience we're learning from it now, and you sharing and what Jean is doing is very instrumental. I mean, recently I have been very much and fascinated by the work done by on August Wilson's work, produced by Denzel Washington. When I look at Marini's Black Bottom and Fences, I am seeing film and I'm seeing theater. And Viola Davis, I mean, she gives a lot of praise to her theater training. And when I look at those films, they are films, but in terms of the setting is confined, but that doesn't take away from the impact, because then we have such intimacy, with the actors in those closed spaces. And the way in which the music as well, the music from the Black culture, the Southern culture is used, the blues, the jazz, etc., and how that's interwoven with the story and the acting. These immense possibilities that I see, the realization of that, from that celebrated playwright, August Wilson, in Black. These are the possibilities I see that can happen. And these, of course, I know they cost a lot of money, but yet look at the way in which the authenticity, if you like, of the theater is kept. But yet you have films that Viola Davis became, I think that these are the films that really made her Fences, in particular, before Ma Rainey's. So, I am still saying that our entire industry, our entire cultural industry, right? I mean, in Trinidad, the calypso industry, the carnival industry, some of the plays that I saw as well before the pandemic, I saw Royal Gibbons plays at a steel place in Tragrit Road. I saw Lee Mark Williams direct another play. So the idea of the folk musical with the use of the calypso, the idea of the use of storytelling and the Creole forms, theater. These hold for me immense possibilities that could have a global impact, and I think that we need to be going in this direction as well, using some of the models that we see and the impact that they have. Then that should imbue us with a certain confidence that we too can move in that type of direction. So people like you, Dean, and others like Wendell, the practitioners who are working, post-pandemic, let's look for.
Yeah, I think so.
I think so too. We touched on that with Branch of the Blue Nile. I think I mentioned that to you yesterday down in Trinidad. We spent about 6 or 10 days in Trinidad and shot it in a play, but we shot it with the close-ups and everything that you would use in film, but it was still a play. And although we never turned it into anything, we used the footage to create a promo. But what you're saying is I don't know if you remember Dial M for Murder, Alfred Hitchcock. His whole, that was a successful play in what I have forgotten, in the equivalent of Broadway in London. But Hitchcock was very specific about keeping that very confined, because he wanted to preserve the essence of the play, but still have it on film. Obviously, it was very successful. So what you're saying, I believe, Derek and I actually even talked about this a couple times, particularly when we were looking at Branch of the Blue Nile, of shooting it in that fashion and releasing it that way. So
Starry Night was actually captured in that way at Essex. There is an existing version that's shot specifically.
Right, yes, that's correct. I've forgotten about that.
Right. All right, good. So I have one last question for the panelists to just help us wrap up, quite in keeping with what we're discussing now, and that is basically the global, the impact of Caribbean performance. I mean, without a doubt, we have it already with reggae and with calypso and so on. But now we're thinking of theater, thinking of performance, thinking of film. What are your thoughts on this? Can you share? What is the potential, and what do we need now to really realize the full potential of theater, of performance, of film? impacting. Yeah. Perhaps we can begin with Lawrence that we started with. What are your thoughts on this one, Lawrence?
I mean, one issue is media, the nature of the medium. Reggae and calypso and so on have real global impact and have for a century in the case of calypso, because they're musical, they're easy to transport, their reproduction is cheap, etc. Once you get to theater, the trouble is just what Dean has been talking about, the language problem. People all over the world will listen to reggae and only know what half of it means, but they like everything else about it. So it translates quickly. And the same is true of a lot of the performance poets, Linton Kwesi Johnson especially, but Muda Baruka as well, have big international reputations as performers, both in recordings and in big venues, rock and roll kinds of venues, because it's a whole package, and what it's going with the music, it's going with the presence of the performer, etc. But the language thing in film is the big challenge. I mean, how many films from the Caribbean have really had global impact? Many of them have been successful in certain markets, in US markets and British markets. But getting them elsewhere, you have to make a market for the subject matter and expect subtitles and all that sort of stuff. So I'm not saying those are not possible to overcome, but it's a big challenge for performance, and especially dramatic performance. But maybe somebody in the group has some ideas about how to get around that.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Henry. It doesn't seem so. Henry got knocked out, huh? Wendell?
Yeah, no, I got it now.
Oh, you're there. You're there.
No, I'm saying that, yes, reggae and in particular and calypso, but the soca form of calypso, because, for example, somebody like Chalk Dust, who I adore and admire, and Blakey and those older fellas, I mean, it's hardly likely that they will ever be popular. The thing is about these, both reggae and calypso, and talking about popularity at one level globally, is money. I mean, not getting money, but making money. That means you're not going to get exposure. If a producer doesn't see that he can bring a Caribbean production over, if he thinks he's not going to make money, I'm not talking about $1,000 and so on. There's some people that might do it just for the fun of it because they like it. But generally, I don't see Caribbean theater, certainly not in my lifetime, that it's going to be popular. I think the scripts might be as pieces of literature, if you want to call it. I mean, the play that I know that is perhaps the most popular Caribbean play, which we talked about a while ago, that has been probably done globally more than any other play that I know of, is Moon on a Rainbow Shawl, and translated into, it's done in Israel and Brazil and all these places. But how successful it is in terms of making money, I am not too sure that we're going to get that. And then our other problem I think in the region is training of our theater people, because see somebody like Wendell is blessed with practically everything. He's got a wonderful voice. He can go anywhere and stand up with the best. What I'm saying, you have very few individual actors or people with the kind of span of knowledge and craft that is able to go abroad. I mean, Derek, you remember that Derek used to try, when I remember the story someone told me in Trinidad about the whole story of the Joke of Seville. And Wendell might be able to give us more detail on this, but I understand, when Derek wanted to do it, when he was commissioned, I think that he wanted to have a group of Caribbean actors take it to RSC and do it. And they wanted their main actors to play it. I have a good friend who's he's co-writing now of the Bob Marley script, which apparently has been approved, by Marley Estate, a new script. But there is this whole thing of who's going to play Marley. And the people who are funding it obviously are going to want somebody who will bring box office in to them, because you're not going to put up $10 million, even if the Marley family is putting up a half of it. So we have that sort of two-faced sort of mask. With one is that we need to have our artists trained. Our institutions in the Caribbean are not properly funded and staffed. You know, Derek talked about this. I remember when we did Carry Festa, it's in the newspapers, when he said it's a monumental waste of time. I don't know if it's time he said it might have been time, because of the fact that you could build theaters, you could staff them and so on. You know, there was a time when places like Festival Center or other, we just don't have these places that are teaching. There are not many theater designers in the Caribbean. There are some people who draw, and who, because of their art, they can draw. But design is a slightly different thing. It's like how, you know, TiJean talks about film and stage. You know, you have to understand the media, because a designer is not an artist is not necessarily a designer, because you're looking at, as a designer, you have to deal with shapes, and you have to deal with juxtaposition of all kinds of things and depth of perception using color. So we need the training. I don't know. My answer is simply, I do not know that anything beyond music is going to get very far globally. And
all right. Okay, Henry, thanks. Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. But when I think of North and all of that, I have some hope. But I understand. I think your focus on training is valid, because even though you produce stuff that has global impact, you want it to be of quality as well. So I think the training is component is essential. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. Let's move on to Wendell and then TiJean.
Well, I mean, I have an inherent belief in our expression and our ability of our expression to be inherently global in its possibility. I like how Dr. TiJean talks about our isness. You know, that who we are, and how do we bring that vitality, whatever the medium. I totally take Dean's point, and in many regards, Derek was way ahead of his time in attempting to do this thing with the lack of support that manifests throughout this part of the world. And of course, if we're waiting on somebody from somewhere else to pay for it, they will want to put their take on it. So it's all about the sacrifices we are prepared to make for authenticity, and for it to ring true to us and to represent in the spirit of the place we come from, that we take great pride in. Walcott inherently believed in us, in our ability to tell his stories. I tell you, I was real lucky when I got the chance to work with Walcott. That little stint in Essex was him putting all his ideas about Caribbean actors performing in the world into action, writing things that kept us working, that kept us engaged. One time when we were doing Starry Night, before the final show, he kept Brian and myself in such a long, teary talk, thanking us, and we thanking him that we almost couldn't perform the show that night. And so I'm deeply, indebted to him, and I inherently believe. I see the many challenges as a creator, as a producer, the lack of belief from the other players on the scene. So we can't say we have an industry, much less an ecosystem. We have plenty culture, plenty talent, but when it comes to making that into product, because just like reggae and calypso, I believe, and because I emphasize the musical nature of the show, this TiJean and his brothers could be in West End or Broadway with the right amount of investment, with the right treatment, with the right marketing. We could be selling out for years. I saw Fela on Broadway. What we could do with TiJean ain't no different. And one of the things I take from Walcott, after I think many times we cast him in this highfalutin way, and it's about accessibility. He says he would like his poems, his plays are large poems, and he wants them to be received the way calypso is received, with the same raw of approval or disapproval. And I think if we treat it with too precious, it becomes inaccessible, and people lose all the fire and the fun and the fury and the funk and the revolution and the spunk and the bad jokes and the brilliant philosophy that is inherent in it. And that is his genius. And we don't need to come and add no more genius on top of that, except bring it alive.
Mm. Thanks. Good. Right. Jean?
Okay, so I have to agree with Henry that that one of the problems that we have is that we need to train. Well, I can't speak too much to stagecraft, but we need to certainly train our directors, our filmmakers, to the highest standard, not teaching them history, but teaching them the aesthetics, making them go to school, do what Derek did all his life, teach other people knowledge. You have to learn from wherever that knowledge can come from. And I think one of the mistakes I feel that this last generation or this has made is that they have literally put themselves in a prison because they say, oh, you mustn't look at Europe, you mustn't look, etc. Would be the last person to suggest that we should be in any way mimics. But you have to understand that there are things that you can't be constantly reinventing the wheel. You have to learn from others, which is what Walker did, put himself to a long apprenticeship. So our artists need to be properly trained. But we also need, and I certainly see no reason whatsoever why Caribbean film should not be global. I did a Caribbean filmmaking thing in Birmingham just before the pandemic, 3 years ago, and I screened The Heart of the Culm, I screened Danso, several films that I liked, the ones that I really loved, and they were very, very well received. But I think that we need to understand something called distribution. You know, we need to understand, and I don't think that the language should be a barrier. We all have grown accustomed to something called subtitles. So yes, I think that there is a market, a global market for Caribbean filmmaking. I can't speak to the stage.
Thank you very much, Jean. Thank you. Now, at this time,
could I just say one more thing? Do you mind, Travis?
Of course, please. No, yeah, go ahead.
Really, an appeal. I have been trying to find young playwrights in the Caribbean, and I can't find any.
We have a lot.
They must be somewhere,
well,
and I'm just looking at
We have a lot. We have a lot.
We have a playwriting course at the Department of Creative and Festival Arts. So, yeah, yep. So let's keep talking.
But what I'm saying is it would be better to get some of them more visible. One of my measures is just BOCUS.
As to what, sorry?
In BOCUS, you see all kinds of poets, you see film people, you see novelists, but you don't see playwrights. And the prizes at BOCUS are not for playwrights. So encouragement of playwrights would be a good thing for us all to work on.
Thank you for that. Yeah, you're speaking, yeah, wonderful, great.
Thank you all very much. Thank you all very much. And I just want to say, with respect to the global impact, we see it with Walcott. Walcott to me is a Shakespeare. The way Shakespeare has been done 400 years plus, I think Walcott's work is going to be the same, because when you do research, you see all these lectures that are being done in universities in India and places in Europe where they're studying Walcott. And yes, Moon has been done widely as a play, but with respect to studying the craft of the man, Walcott has been studied as Shakespeare has been and is being. So that's my 2 cents. With respect to the playwriting, we have a lot of playwrights, but the problem, as Dr. Briner says, publishing. We need to get them out there and have the facilities. The thing about the funding, it comes down to getting the sponsors locally, as Walcott says, and we say too, in the Caribbean, we're just a bunch of Philistines. We have no appreciation for our own culture. So that there are corporate sponsors who are willing, but they will only be willing to give so much. So I guess we need to canvass governments and government agencies to help, because rightly said, external sponsors will want to do it their way. And this is, I'm always about memory and creating memory and archiving material for the future generations, 200 years down the road or whatever it is. So we need to, you
also need
and that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, thank you, Carol. Okay, panelists. Now, I have had the opportunity and the honor to really work with a gentleman, and I would like to bring him on. He is still our head of department, outgoing, but our head of department of the Department of Creative and Festival Arts. So I'd like to ask Mr. Remark Williams to come and help us close this installment of Theatre Classics.
Thank you, Travis. I think my task is very simple today. I think after listening to 2.5 hours of this conversation, all I can do at this point is say thank you. Thank you to all of you who participated inside of here. Larry, calling you by first name, Jean, Wendell, and Henry, and to our 2 moderators, Travis and Carol, for taking us through this journey. I mean, I understand some of the works of Derek and understand TiJean. I was reflecting as I listened at 35 years ago, approximately 1987, when we were the Creative Arts Center then, the first ever student production we would have done would have been TiJean and His Brothers, directed by Roll Gibbons. And 35 years later, we're here and still learning from the kind of depth that was brought out here in this conversation tonight. And it makes me realize that, yes, TiJean and His Brothers is one of the theatre classics. And whatever we can do to make this work continue, be it in film or on stage, be it even as Wendell would have done and created a contemporary version of it, I think the work has to live on. We at the department are going to continue to try our best with training, helping to work with the film department, and doing all that we can to make sure that the work and the theatre classics of the Caribbean stay intact and continue to be supported. And we are going to continue this series of theatre classics of the Caribbean, exposing more works, having more people like you coming and talk to the rest of us about experiences within this. So again, from the bottom of my heart, I want to say thanks to all of you. And I want to say thanks to our technical team, to Kieran Reed and Mr. Joseph Drayton, for the support behind the scenes. And it was really a joy seeing so many of you on the Zoom tonight. You know, I give thanks, I give thanks, I give thanks. Thank you, everybody. On behalf of the Department of Creative and Festival Arts, Faculty of Humanities and Education, UB St. Augustine, I, Louis McWilliams, says thank you, have a safe night, and continue to tune in with us for more episodes of Theatre Classics of the Caribbean. Thanks again, guys.
Thank you, Louis.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
Louis. Thanks, everyone.
Blessed
Thank
night,
you.
everyone.
Blessings to the audience.
Thank you again.
Travis, it was
Thank
wonderful.
you, thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful
Lovely to
session.
meet everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
It's
Thank
a
you.
pleasure.
Thank you, Jean,
Nice,
Carol.
nice,
Meet
nice,
again.
nice seeing you, Henry.
Thank you.
Yes, Louis. Thank you, and
Yeah.
Wendell. Thank you, man.
Nice seeing
Thank
you
you very
Henry.
much.
Haven't seen
Experience
you
and
for a while,
I learned a
Wendell.
whole lot. And